Romance Rendezvous. Chapter 193 We Are Not Equals. As the capital of one of the Holy Continent's major secular forces, the Central Water City was a bustling place of more than 25 million citizens spread across 7,000 square miles. The hierarchical structure was the same as the Holy Flame Empires, with humans at the bottom, beast nobles at the middle, and spirits at the top. However, mermaids, or water spirits as some called them, replaced the Holy Flame Empire's flame spirits and took a more active role in politics. For example, the current queen was a mermaid, while most of the imperial consorts at least possessed some mermaid blood. Upon reaching the city's gate, Conrad's eyes showed no emotion. Two members of the delegation announced their identity and intent from within their seats, then waved their identification tokens through the carriage windows. Having been alerted of the impending visit of the Holy Flame Empire's delegation, the guards were not startled. One sent a message to the royal palace while the other opened the gate to allow the convoy free passage. Afterward, a man came to lead them through the city. State emissaries and delegates always had assigned quarters they were meant to rest in during the first day of arrival. However, considering the urgency of the situation and the relationship he was trying to build with the Holy Flame Empire, the king stipulated to have them directly brought to the palace where he had unique quarters prepared. Conrad briefly swept the populace and architecture, and from his seat, he could see a towering basilica standing in the distance with a glowing blue orb hovering above. He identified it as the seat of the Water Temple. The Water Temple was not only weaker than the Holy Flame Church, but it was also completely decentralized. Each of the 15 kingdoms comprising the Water Kingdom Alliance possessed its own branch of the Water Temple, with each competing for resources. This infighting had prevented them from asserting dominance over the royal families, who, left on their own devices, ended up suppressing them instead. Here, there was no high and head exarch. Each branch answered to its own conclave of exarchs. Conrad closed the window and returned to meditation. The current Water Kingdom Alliance king, Ernst von Gradl, is a petty craven, outwardly gracious but inwardly narrow-minded. If slighted by a weaker force, he will always seek revenge. But when faced with the mighty, he only knows how to bow and scrape, not even daring to foster rebellious thoughts. Serpent form Yvonne said through a mental message. I know, browsing through the minds of my servants, I already did my homework on the various secular forces, but it matters not, brave or craven. Since he has the misfortune of facing us, he must grovel. Were she not in her miniature Hecate cobra form, Yvonne would have nodded in approval. Instead, she just rubbed her head against Conrad's cheek and with a smile, he stroked her flaming scales. Your Majesty, the Holy Flame Empire's delegation has arrived and is currently on its way. The messenger announced to the Water Alliance king, a middle-aged paragon spirit man with a peak stage profound saint cultivation base. Instantaneously, he rose from his throne, excitement shining on his face. Quick, quick, have the second and fourth prince entertain them while we prepare the banquet. This evening, we shall receive them. Ernst ordered to one of his royal eunuchs, barely able to contain his excitement. However, before he could depart, he changed his mind. No, add the third princess on the list. After all, she's the best at entertaining guests. Though it's a bit improper, we must show the highest degree of goodwill. Nothing can go wrong, yes? As you command, Your Majesty. The royal eunuch bowed and excused himself before hurriedly informing the princes and princess of the order. Their reactions wildly differed. Romance Rendezvous. While the third princess merely gave an approving nod, the second prince flew into a rage. How could we possibly have royal princes personally welcome a bunch of delegates? Where does that put our country's dignity? Even if we seek an alliance with the Holy Flame Empire, do we really need to stoop so low? We might as well just surrender our cities and become their vassal. While the fourth prince agreed with his elder brother's outrage, he didn't dare voice his opinion. As the convoy reached the royal palace's gates, a large group awaited. 12 men clad in the Water Kingdom's official robes stood with a paragon spirit trio leading them. That trio was naturally composed of the von Gradl royalty. The second prince stood in the middle, with his younger brother on his right and his sister on the left. Although his heart concealed grievances and indignity, he let nothing transpire on his face, ready to complete this task as soon as possible, then return to cultivation. However, when the convoy's carriages opened and the leading member appeared, his face contorted into a frown. Not only him, but his siblings and even the officials couldn't conceal their surprise. At the group's helm was an effeminate-looking young man around the age of 17, clad in regal robes and ornaments. However, no matter how lavish his clothes and tokens looked, they couldn't mask the fact that he was human. What was a human boy doing in this gathering? That human boy was Kron in disguise. To have more freedom, Conrad had him maintain the camouflage while he adopted the position of one of the delegates. Quickly, the second prince examined their group, and when his eyes fell upon Conrad, who still had his cobra coiling around his torso, furor shone within. There was not only one, but two humans in this delegation, and clearly, considering their alignment, the one wearing the jeweled crown was the leading member. What was the meaning of this? But as he inwardly boiled, he spotted the 10th elder within the crowd, and immediately his rage subsided. "Greetings, senior." The second prince bowed toward the 10th von Jürgen elder, and immediately all those by his followed suit. "Greetings, senior." As a senior member of House von Jürgen, the 10th elder carried the imperial family's face and dignity. Since he was present, the Holy Flame Empire couldn't be disrespecting them. On the contrary, it was giving them face. As for those two human youths, the second prince reckoned their presence must have some other purpose. Alas, he'd never expected that upon hearing those words, the 10th elder would explode in rage. "Bold, His Majesty's 9th son stands before you, but instead of giving him due honor, you're disregarding him to bow to me? Is this an attempt to insult our sovereign? Or are you possibly looking down on His Grace, the Imperial Duke?" The Water Kingdom Alliance's reception team was startled. Didn't news recently pass that the 9th von Jürgen prince was, in fact, a princess? Why was there suddenly talk of a 9th son? Their eyes again fell on Kron, whose face didn't conceal his rising rage. Immediately, they recalled the rumor of the Holy Flame Emperor adopting a human eunuch boy as his 9th son. At first, no one took such words seriously, believing that someone was trying to disparage the von Jürgen dynasty. But now, even a pig could see truth where it lied. Did the Holy Flame Emperor's brain get trampled by a stampede of 10,000 horses? Still, that was secondary. If the Holy Flame Emperor wanted to turn his house into a joke, it was his problem. Why was he sending that joke into their den? In the end, who was insulting who? All the furor the second prince had suppressed erupted in a wild outburst. "10th elder, I gave you due respect as a senior of our race. However, it seems you've been wallowing in degeneration for so long that you don't even remember your paragon spirit dignity. Allow me to remind you, the laws of the land are clear. In the Holy Continent, humans are slaves. That is an ancestral truth. Wanting me, a royal prince, to bow to a human eunuch, to bow to a trivial slave, is impossible. Even my royal father cannot tolerate such an insult. Keep such rubbish in your country." He spat, and although they didn't use such words, the officials agreed. "We're here to build an alliance, not to receive insults. If this is your country's sincerity, I'm afraid these negotiations won't be." But before the second prince could finish his words, a resounding slap thundered, and he spiraled into the air to tumble onto the ground with 3 of his teeth flying and blood dripping from his lips. The move was too fast, and none of the Water Kingdom Alliance's people understood what occurred. Even the second prince, whose cultivation had reached the mid-stages of the semi-holy knight rank, couldn't determine what just struck him. His startled eyes rose to see Conrad standing in his previous spot with his cold purple eyes nailing him on the ground. "You dare strike me? Within my country, you dare strike me? What if I dare? What can you do? Did you think this was a partnership of equals?" Conrad stretched out his hand, causing a vast telekinetic force to pull the second prince back into his hand. While clutching his neck within, He swept the reception team with his cold purple eyes, causing them to subconsciously take several steps back. From the moment you sacrificed a state treasure for the sake of selling your first daughter, our relationship was set. In everything but name, you are vassals. If you don't even understand that reality, allow me to make it clear, once and for all. The second von Gradel prince was instigated by treacherous officials to disrespect the Holy Flame Empire's delegation and insult our sovereign. To protect the relationship between our two countries, we have no choice but to slay them and restore peace. Kill. As Conrad's words echoed, the country officials' eyes widened in fright. When did we? But they didn't have time to muster a defense. Spurred by Conrad's words, the 10th von Jürgen Elder summoned a holy energy sword and beheaded them all on the spot. Detached from their necks, their heads flew with their blood, drenching the 4th prince and 3rd princess that stood dazed before this unexpected scene. Unceremoniously, Conrad tossed the terror-stricken 2nd prince into the puddle of blood and turned toward his similarly frightened siblings. Lead the way, and if you do not wish to suffer the same fate, avoid rubbish. The brother and sister pair shuddered, and with sweat trickling down their foreheads, they gave the delegation a profound bow. We won't dare. How is this a youth? Clearly, it was an old saint monster in disguise. Chapter 194, Beautiful Monster Part 1. Conrad's purple eyes fell back onto the 2nd prince who floundered within the blood puddle. The 2nd prince feels deep remorse at his actions and wishes to kneel for the whole duration of our stay in a show of repentance. Do I make myself clear? How could the 2nd prince not understand Conrad's meaning? With a feeble nod, he submitted and knelt in the blood puddle while his quivering hands rested on his thighs. Conrad's eyes returned onto the remaining 2. After you. Not daring to delay, they turned heels and brought the delegation in. Seeing how efficiently his master handled the situation, Kron inwardly jubilated. A pity that with his current human eunuch disguise, he couldn't freely use his strength. Otherwise, he would have already smashed all those bastards into oblivion. To maintain pretense, Kron stayed at the delegation's helm while Conrad and the 10th elder stood a step behind him. The rest followed at their back. With the 2 royals leading the way, the delegation quickly reached their assigned quarters. The Water Alliance king hadn't done things sparingly, preparing them courtyards and mansions that rivaled that of princes. You already have maidservants waiting inside. Others will follow suit, bringing alongside them meals and refreshments. If you have any preference, please tell me. The 3rd princess stammered. While at first, she found Conrad's appearance overwhelmingly captivating, now, she didn't even dare maintain eye contact, fearing that she'd offend that heartless monster and suffer a fate similar to those officials. As for the 4th prince, he was a man of few words, to begin with. The situation being what it was, he only wanted to leave as soon as possible. Hiss? Yvonne's hissing sound startled the edgy 4th prince, who yelped in surprise and leaped back. Stumbling, he fell on his rear waist. As a country prince, how can a cobra's hissing sound put you in such a state? Get lost. Senior, please forgive my lack of decorum. I shall take my leave. The 4th prince hurriedly stuttered and ran off, leaving his sister behind. Seeing how fast that good brother was in abandoning her, the 3rd princess sighed. When can we meet His Majesty? A banquet is currently being organized in your honor. You will meet my father during the celebration. All the members of the royal family will be present. That naturally includes my eldest sister. Conrad then got back to petting his cobra's scales. Taking it as her cue to leave, the princess gave them all a profound bow. If there is nothing else, I will also take my leave. And without further ado, she vanished from sight. Master, don't you want to keep that princess to warm your bed? Asked the 10th elder, eager to make contributions. And Kron sent him flying with a punch. Arg! Idiot! With the mistress here, what need is there for a trivial arch-rank princess? To earn the honor, at the very least, she should be a semi-saint. I spoke wrongly. Commander, please forgive me. Humph. In the hierarchy of Conrad's household, Kron held the Legion Commander rank. Having been introduced to the household situation through Conrad's rewiring, the new servants now knew how to address that mobster. You can all rest in your respective courtyards. Tonight, we meet for the banquet. I believe it shall be eventful. Conrad ordered, and immediately, seriousness returned within the troops. Yes, master. Father. Father. The fourth prince barreled into the throne room where his father currently stood. Seeing his son charge in like a desperate bull, Ernst von Gradl rose from his throne, his eyes flaring with anger. What the hell is wrong with you? Have you lost all sense of propriety? But with the situation at hand, how could the fourth von Gradl prince care about any of that? Terrible things happened. Second brother offended the delegation and the fourth prince then proceeded to retell precisely what happened, not missing any detail. Hearing of how his officials were butchered and his children disgraced, the Water Alliance king seethed with rage. However, when he recalled the political situation, he released a sorrowful sigh. Son, we live in chaotic times. Prosperous Wind is suffering tremendous pressure while Great Void is about to receive the Holy Flame Empire's assault. We only need one of those two to breach the Grand Treaty and openly make use of experts at the semi-holy rank or above to usher the era of the Holy Flame Empire's world hegemony. Even if they don't, with the current trend, Holy Flame will still be the grand winner. That man spoke true. We are their vassal in anything but name. What can a vassal possibly do to the suzerain? Your second brother must kneel. Otherwise, if this matter alarms the Holy Flame Emperor, our family's lives are in jeopardy. Again, the Water Alliance king sighed and dropped onto his throne, but while he spoke such words, his eyes shone with killing intent. Not being able to openly confront them was one thing. Swallowing this slight was another. Meanwhile, the third princess rushed into the inner court's royal bathhouse, where only high-ranking female members of the royal family were allowed. There, two stately women were currently enjoying a warm bath's comfort. One was a sapphire-eyed beauty whose shoulders rested against the pool's walls, while her dark blue hairs draped the ground at her back. As she lifted her legs, one could see that beneath her waist, blue fish scales began and ended in a mermaid tail. She was the Water Kingdom Alliance Queen, Augusta Meissner. Before her, a young woman glided above the water. Her dripping silver hairs and translucent skin made her paragon spirit heritage evident. But unlike the average paragon spirit, her eyes were sapphire-colored. She was the Water Kingdom Alliance's first princess, Lena von Gradl. Seeing them, the third princess curtsied. Mother, eldest sister, the delegation arrived. Sensing her daughter's flustering, the Water Alliance queen turned toward her. With her peak stage profound saint cultivation and senses, even if the third princess didn't say anything, she could feel her distress. What happened? Did you meet some handsome youth that made your heart aflutter? The queen jested. More like a beautiful monster. The third princess then retold the events, after which both Augusta's and Lena's eyes contorted into frowns. Chapter 195 Beautiful Monster Part 2. In the meantime, the cross-legged Conrad tested himself in the formation setting arts. 24 glittering blue crystals hovered around him, aligned in an intricate web and connected by blue light lines. The 24 crystals formed a formation circle that swirled above Conrad's head. With a wave of his hand, the formation circle expanded before descending onto the ground and setting a detection array across the room. With his first successful formation setting, Conrad could officially call himself a formation master. Of course, with his current knowledge and skills, he only qualified as an elementary formation master. Yvonne, who lied by his side, eyed all this neutrally. The formation master path is too time-consuming. Although with your current soul power, you can probably compare to the average profound formation master, I'm not sure you can actually reach that skill level without a year's worth of work. Formation levels were ranked as elementary, nascent, great, profound, and sublime. Elementary formations were effective on true rank experts and below. Nascent formations were limited to the arch rank. Great formations to the transcendent rank, and profound formations to the holy rank. With his current soul power, Conrad indeed didn't lose out to the average profound formation master. A pity that his learning level was still too low. Time is not a big problem. Having mastered the elementary formation code, Conrad exchanged the nascent formation code from the system. Seeing its price equal to a high-grade arch-rank artifact, it wasn't hard to imagine that the profound formation code would cost a high-grade holy artifact's price. As for the sublime formation code, it would probably rival divine rank treasures. While formations were of vital importance in faction and army building, Conrad wasn't willing to expend billions of EXP just for a formation code. With that amount, he could improve his bloodline and physiques. If a bloodline upgrade was an overall boost in strength, a physique was like an additional cultivation base. For example, a mastered holy physique was equivalent to an extra saint-level cultivation base. Although in the awakened stage, physique abilities were greatly restrained, they still gave many passive boons. For that reason, Conrad's current body was already more resilient than the average high-grade holy artifact. Without a high-grade holy artifact or a star-taming stage cultivation base, injuring him was a daunting task. Therefore, as far as tribulation stage experts were concerned, even if he couldn't defeat them, they could forget about taking his life. For the same reason, Conrad didn't pay much attention to external forces such as artifacts. He would use them if he had to, but his soul, flesh, and blood would always form his mightiest foundation. As for the following formation tomes, they were likely to exist within the Tower of Rebirth. There, he could surely build the whole collection. In a twister of dark sand, Yvonne morphed into her half-serpent form, with everything beneath her waist turning into a long serpent tail while she coiled around Conrad's sitting form. Though he might not show outward complaints, the Water Alliance King will surely not take kindly to his son's treatment. Which one do you think it will be? Poison or assassins? She asked while wrapping her scaled tail around Conrad's waist. Why can't it be both? In any case, I came to suck his 15 states dry. He and I were never meant to be friends. Conrad replied and took her lips into his. Clothes were quickly set aside, and moans soared against the walls. At dusk, servants knocked on the door to announce the banquet's imminent start. The disheveled Conrad reorganized his appearance, while Yvonne returned to her miniature Hekaret demon form. As before, she wrapped herself around his torso, maintaining the facade of the tamed, exotic pet cobra, and together, they left the chambers. As the delegation leader, Kron was the first alerted and already waited on the outside. The 10th elder soon appeared, and after him, the 21 remaining delegation members quickly showed themselves. Led by the maidservants, the group then headed toward the banquet hall where the royals awaited. Music brightened the lavish setting while rows of royal family members filled the many seats. At the hall's end, the Water Alliance King sat on his throne, with the Queen by his side. As the delegates arrived, all eyes fell upon them. But while Kron led the group, all ignored him to instead stare at the human elder at his back. The Von Grattel kinswomen, in particular, regardless of their own marital status, could hardly shift their gaze from that cobra-wielding, purple-eyed man whose body looked like a marvel. Is he a dream spirit's descendant? That thought swirled within the mind of all the gathered individuals. After all, in their knowledge, only dream spirits could produce such an effect. But when they recalled that the few dream spirits that existed in the ancient crystal world all resided within the celestial church, they dismissed the thought. From the corner of his eye, the Water Alliance King could see that although more reserved, even his queen wasn't indifferent to that teen-looking, saint elder's charms. Doubly incensed, he gritted his teeth in suppressed rage, while clutching his thighs beneath the table. That man's outrageousness truly knew no bounds. Not only did he dare wreak havoc within his realm and smack his royal face, but he also openly seduced his wife. Since his face transcended the limits of human perfection, couldn't he hide it? The gals. Why had he never heard that there were also men whose looks could topple countries? But when he recalled the fate he had in store for Conrad, his ire dispersed, and with a bright, hospitable smile, he rose from his seat. Your Grace, dear delegates, it is my house's honor to welcome you to our table. Please take your seats. We've prepared our Water Kingdom Alliance's most outstanding dishes, musicians, and dancers to entertain you all. As the delegation's official leader, it was now Kron's turn to speak. Thank you, Your Majesty, for your kind welcome. It's a pity that your second son was instigated by disloyal officials and almost ruined our two countries' good relationships. But I heard he's so distraught about the whole thing that he chose to kneel at the palace's gate until our departure. Such a repentant heart is truly hard to come by. To make sure his good intentions don't go to waste, Your Majesty should ensure he keeps kneeling until we bring the future crown princess back to the Holy Flame Empire. Kron replied in a polite bow, causing the Water Alliance king to drop his wine glass. Chapter 196 Fatal Mistake Part 1. Instantaneously, music stopped, eyes widened, tension rose, and apprehension filled the air. The Water Alliance king's hand trembled while he struggled to not let his face distort. What was this? This was insult. Naked, unrestrained insult meant to shame him before his house. In his more than 1,000 years of life, Ernst von Gradl had never suffered such a slight. And even if he were thick-skinned, this would still be hard to bear. You are going too far. A voice boomed from Kron's left. Turning toward its origin, he saw a paragon spirit man that seemed to be in his mid-20s. Boasting a seventh-step, semi-saint cultivation base and adorning unique princely attire, his status wasn't hard to guess. He was the more than 400 years old Alliance Crown Prince. Excuse me? Who might you be? But Kron didn't seem to recognize him. As the Crown Prince's outburst still echoed within the room, his eyes showed confusion. You. Assuming Kron was trying to disrespect him, the Crown Prince exploded. Although he wasn't born from the Queen, he still was a great throne's heir. Who dared disparage him so? Not content of insulting our state within 5 minutes of your arrival, you don't even know the proper limitations and relentlessly keep pushing our bottom line. Do you think this is the Holy Flame Empire? The words rang true in many of the von Gradl kinsmen, who felt the Holy Flame Empire's delegation showed no sense of propriety. However, both the Queen, Augusta, and the first princess, Lena, frowned. Oh, that is to say, we're the guilty party and the second prince did nothing wrong? Kron calmly asked, following Conrad's guidance. And immediately, the king, the queen, and the first princess understood the ploy. Natura. But before the crown prince could finish his words, Ernst waved his hand, causing a large wave of holy force to lock the crown prince's body and prevent him from speaking further. Naturally not. My Water Kingdom Alliance is at fault for allowing treacherous officials to mislead a royal prince. Your Grace spoke true. I should help my son showcase his repentant heart. Ernst interrupted with an ugly, forced smile, to the crown prince's great dismay. Kron sighed. If he could trigger that cow dung some more, then they could get an excuse for another public round of face-slapping. A pity. Hearing the Water Alliance king's prompt admission of guilt, the delegation members all sneered, their mocking faces fueling the royals' discontent. Music soon resumed, but tension remained palpable. Alongside their fellow delegates, Conrad and Kron took their assigned seats that stood close to the king's. With those few words, Kron had managed to pull most of the crowd's attention away from Conrad. However, Augusta and Lena's eyes remained locked on him. Considering the third princess report, they felt that while he'd not said anything, he must have had a hand in Kron's words and was looking for an opportunity to suppress them further. Instead of a bride securing delegation, this group looked like a foreign oppressor eager to wrest benefits from the weaker state. They could absolutely not give them the opportunity. 8 lovely female dancers soon came in, their performance easing the tension that filled the air. Friendly talks finally resumed. However, the royals kept the pleasantries among themselves, not mingling with the delegates. Your Grace, what do you think of our country's dancers? The Water Alliance King asked Kron while maintaining his fake smile. Not bad. Later on, Your Majesty should have them give us private dances. The Water Alliance King thus realized that he should avoid getting Kron's attention at all cost. Afterward, rows of maidservants carried the dishes in. Though the dishes were similar, each table already possessed its assigned plates. As his maidservant filled his table with the dishes, Conrad's eyes flashed with amusement. The palace maids then excused themselves, leaving the gathered royals and delegates to enjoy their meals. Everyone, to our dear delegates and the prosperous relationship between our two countries, the Water Alliance King proclaimed with a new wine glass raised. But from the corner of his eye, he glanced toward Conrad. Thinking of the poison he'd prepared especially for him, his heart beamed with joy. This was a colorless, odorless, and tasteless saint-level poison that took 9 days to act. Once ingested, it would take the 9 days to silently lodge itself in the cultivator's organs, then flare up in a single outburst. All internal organs would implode, thus ending the target's life. Both Conrad's dishes and wine had been infested with the poison. Although he wouldn't be there to witness its outburst, thinking of Conrad's impending demise, the Water Alliance King couldn't help but inwardly jubilate. But while, Kron included, all raised their wine cups to meet the king's toast, Conrad didn't touch his, and his lips curled into a smile. With his wholly stolous physique, no saint-level poison could escape his senses. Not only could they not evade his detection, but they couldn't harm him in the slightest. At best, they would act as nourishment. And seeing how intently he stared at the wine and plates before him, the Water Alliance King couldn't prevent a foreboding feeling from rising within his chest. Again, all eyes fell upon Conrad. Delegation Protector, is something the matter? Augusta asked with a growing sense of apprehension, using Conrad's registered title. Oh, I was just thinking of the second prince suffering alone while we all feast. This situation fills my heart with dismay. After all, his repentance is clear to all. I wish to offer him my plate and wine so that although he can't be here with us, he can share in our celebration. Instantaneously, a wave of confusion spread through the gathered royals while Augusta's and Lena's eyes were filled with doubt. And when they turned toward Ernst and saw the soaring fright within his gaze, enlightenment replaced their doubts. Their eyes widened in shock. No, he wouldn't dare. Not here. Not now. He can't be that foolish. Augusta tried to reassure herself. However, the more she looked at Ernst, the more she felt herself unable to refute the reality. Protector, your solicitude goes straight to our heart. However, there is no need for that. I can have dishes delivered to the P. No, I insist. This is our Holy Flame Empire's gift. I hope your Majesty won't interfere with our show of goodwill. Conrad cut, and the pressure within his words made it clear that denial was intolerable. Now, even a pig could see that the dishes were problematic. At the very least, Conrad's were. Otherwise, why would he push to have them sent to the prince who knelt by his order? Perplexed eyes fell on the Water Alliance King who could barely contain his ugly grimace. The realization that his treachery had been exposed struck him hard, and with cold sweat, he staggered. However, he then recalled that this was a slow-acting poison. Therefore, even if the second prince consumed it, there would be time for countermeasures. At the very least, this banquet wouldn't turn into a funeral. With that thought propping him, his vigor was renewed, and determination shone within his eyes. Very well, as the delegation protector wishes, please have the dishes delivered to the second prince. When he heard those words, Conrad's smile grew brighter. Chapter 197 Fatal Mistake Part 2. A maidservant rushed in to pick Conrad's silver plate. Lifting it, she bowed toward him, bowed toward the king, then prepared to take her leave. Wait, may His Majesty dispatch one guard to make sure the girl doesn't embezzle or tamper with the food. I will also do the same. Now, there was no longer any need for pretense, and Ernst failed to fake smiles. As you wish. He then had a royal eunuch escort the girl, while Conrad dispatched a delegation member to do the same. Even if she wasn't well-versed in politics, the maidservant could feel the crushing weight of the plate she held, and the knowledge that she might be bringing poisoned food to a royal made her arms tremble. If anything happened to the second prince, even if the king didn't immediately blame her, how could he not vent his anger on a later date? Without background, peerless beauty, or strength, a quick death was the best outcome she could hope for. Still, she could not disobey, because if she did, she would die on the spot. Droplets of tears filled her eyes as she turned heels and left the banquet hall. Again, a deathly silence dropped on the scene, and this time, music didn't dare resume. The royals clasped their thighs in anxiety while Kron, the 10th elder, and the remaining delegates didn't conceal their seething wrath. Clearly, if the test proved conclusive, blood would flow. "What have you done?" Augusta asked Ernst through a mental message. "Nothing," he categorically denied. Of course, his words failed to put her at ease. Still, she believed her husband wouldn't be retarded enough to not use a slow-acting poison. At least, they should be able to pass this hurdle. Lena, the first princess, also thought the same. However, as they stared at Conrad's bright smiling face and how leisurely he petted his cobra, they couldn't repress their apprehension. Time passed in a tortuously slow manner, with seconds feeling like hours. Following an oppressive 30 minutes of quiet, the delegate returned alongside the eunuch and maidservant. The maidservant dropped onto her knees and profusely kowtowed. "Your Majesty, please spare me." That those were her first words upon return took the Water Alliance king aback, but before he could inquire on why he should spare her, the trembling eunuch also fell on his knees. Only the delegate stood still, his eyes shining with unconstrained rage. "Speak," he roared, and the eunuch, whose forehead was already full of sweat, also kowtowed. "Your Majesty, the second prince is dead." By the time he finished the wine, blood erupted from all his orifices, and he perished on the spot. There was nothing we could do. As those words echoed, the Water Alliance king staggered and fell back on his throne. Simultaneously, the entire room went into an uproar. How could it be? His Majesty really dared poison holy flame dignitaries to death during the banquet? How could he possibly be this muddled? What is the meaning of this? But as the whispers carried on, Kron slammed his hand onto the table facing him, then rose from his seat to turn a menacing glower toward the Water Alliance king. "You have 3 seconds to give us a reasonable answer. Otherwise, I must change the monarch." He roared while brandishing Ulrich's imperial token, which he'd received from Conrad. Vast holy force erupted from it, and although the energy signature was that of a peak-stage true origin saint, the density already surpassed that of the average fate wrestling saint. The token's shape matched with the power rippling from it made its origin evident. No one had expected that the Holy Flame Emperor would bestow a token carrying such a substantial amount of his holy force onto that adopted human son of his. And when faced with its dreadful might, Ernst floundered within his seat with sweat trickling down his forehead. "Fool. Utter, complete fool. How could you be this muddled? You've paid the price of a son's life to ruin the country." Augusta roared in a mental message that wreaked havoc within Ernst's mind. Her words shredded him from inside. I really didn't. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not like this." Ernst's thoughts were in disarray. His heart rate went off the rails, and as he suffered the stroke of a lifetime, his body shook and he spat blood. Ernst could not have imagined that as soon as the plate and wine were dropped on his table, Conrad used his Stola's powers to change the poison's properties and turn it from slow-acting to instantaneous. Of course, the second prince had no hope of survival. The delegation members all rose in indignation and, led by the 10th elder, summoned their energy weapons, ready to spill Von Grattel blood. 3 seconds are up. The Water Alliance king went mad and attempted to murder the Holy Flame Empire's delegates. "With the authority bestowed upon me by his imperial majesty, I shall take his life." Kron aimed the token at the floundering Ernst and gathered its holy force for a fatal strike. Lena and Augusta realized that if this blow passed, not only was Ernst's life forfeit, but they could no longer escape the charge. This matter would forever be known as the king's failed assassination attempt of a foreign dignitary. They had to stop it at all cost. Both turned into light beams to reappear before Kron, barring his path. This is a misunderstanding. His Majesty is obviously not involved in the Protector's assassination attempt. Otherwise, how could he so leisurely send the plate to his son? Clearly, this is Great Void's ploy to destroy our two countries' good relationship and prevent a joint assault. Please think twice. Augusta proclaimed for all to hear, her words filling Ernst with enlightenment. Right. I have nothing to do with this. This must be Great Void's attempt at framing me and breaking our alliance. Please restrain your anger, he exclaimed. But at that time, Conrad stood up, vanished, and reappeared by Kron's side. Whether this is a foreign plot or not, doesn't matter. Whether you intended for this to happen or not, doesn't matter. The only thing we know for sure is that you served Holy Flame dignitaries lethal poison and almost caused a guest's demise. For this, you must pay. If not with your life, then. Conrad's purple eyes swept the three royals before him, and a dreadful pressure coming from his supreme overlord physique oppressed them where they stood. With your country. Feeling the suffocating pressure emanating from him and the domineering words that left no room for compromise, Augusta firmly believed that if they couldn't offer satisfying compensation, a bloodbath was inevitable. Must you be so overbearing? At the end of the day, I'm still your future crown princess. Is this how the Holy Flame Empire conducts diplomacy? Lena questioned, the unwillingness to bend clear within her eyes. Diplomacy is a tool used between equals. When your force can threaten mine, we negotiate. But when with a palm we can suppress you, we command. That, princess, is diplomacy. The divine primal physique's pressure erupted alongside the supreme overlords, forcing the three royals who faced the brunt of the two forces to recoil in fright. Knowing that the situation couldn't be salvaged through honeyed words, Augusta was forced to make a decision she knew would doom the Water Kingdom alliance throughout eternity. If you want to live, give them the 15 states' army tokens and the key to our treasury, she urged Ernst through another mental message. Chapter 198, Surrendering the Country Part 1. Each of the 15 states comprising the Water Kingdom alliance possessed its own army token. On top of being low-grade holy artifacts, those army tokens allowed the owner to freely dispatch state troops, granting absolute control over the generals and armies. Moreover, the great generals all possessed lesser tokens that allowed communication with the main token holder and facilitated orders. To strengthen the Alliance King's control over the various states, all the tokens remained in his hand. Without them, even the various state rulers couldn't dispatch their troops. For tens of thousands of years, this practice carried on. Once those tokens fell into the Holy Flame Empire's delegates' hands, the title of Alliance King served no purpose and Ernst could immediately pledge his allegiance as a perpetual vassal. Unwilling. He was unwilling. How could a monarch possibly surrender his authority in such a humiliating manner? However, as Conrad's piercing, purple eyes nailed him, he didn't doubt that should he falter, his life was in jeopardy. Rage and indignation welled up within his chest, and though he wished to challenge Augusta's suggestion at all cost, he didn't dare. Ultimately, his life was, to him, more valuable than his pride. With several wobbling steps, Ernst walked by Augusta to stop before Conrad. Thud, and dropped on his knees while extending his still trembling hands toward him. In a light haze, a plate appeared on his palms. On top of that plate, 15 bronze seals rippling with holy force stood. A silver key then appeared amidst the seals. I am guilty of failing to manage my state and almost causing the Protector harm. I hereby surrender the 15 states' army tokens to the Holy Flame Empire and offer you free access to our state treasury. I also beseech you to not pursue this matter. Ernst stammered, the words depleting all his body's strength. Seeing their house's master and monarch surrender in such a wretched way, the von Grattel kinsmen and women were full of shame. But since things had reached this point, surrender was indeed the only road to survival. Alas, they'd underestimated Conrad's appetite. Insufficient. That word flabbergasted all the members of House von Grattel, and the stammering king's eyes rose toward those overbearing purple hues that nailed him from above. What more could you possibly want? With a wave of his hand, Conrad brought the 15 tokens and treasury key into his emerald bracelet. Surrender your royal seal? Ernst's eyes widened in disbelief. If the army token was half the king's authority, the royal seal was the other half. Only the royal seal guaranteed that edicts couldn't be falsified. Without it, not only could he not send edicts by proxy, but whoever held it could draft them in his name. Moreover, it was a mid-grade holy artifact. Without it, at best, his authority as king couldn't go beyond the city. At worst, it would be restrained to the royal palace. Offering it was no different from abdicating his throne. How could he accept it? You can't go too. However, before he could struggle, Augusta's voice boomed within his mind. Surrender it. At this juncture, we must be decisive. If you falter, we perish. Forced back into reality by his wife's words, Ernst bit his lower lips till blood spilled and trickled down his chin. Still, recalling Conrad's dreadful pressure, he couldn't resist, and the royal water seal, an ocean blue serpent seal, appeared on the plate. Conrad took it into his hand, then turned toward one of the high-level semi-saint delegates. Draft and send royal edicts to the 14 other state rulers, ordering them to join us in the royal palace within 24 hours for a grand summit. As you command, Protector. Immediately, the semi-saint gathered paper and ink to draft the decrees and seal them with the royal water seal. He then deferentially returned it to Conrad. Seeing his fears proven right at such a fast pace, Ernst almost collapsed. Only the belief that House von Grattel's strongest elders would definitely cooperate in snatching back those items filled him with hope. Just you wait. If I can't repay you 1,000-fold, my name isn't Ernst von Grattel. But while he made his inward pledge, Conrad's eyes fell back on him, and assailed by its intensity, Ernst felt as if Conrad completely saw through him. His righteous indignation was thus replaced by a new current of fright. Startled, he fell onto his rear. Like father, like son, ruler in name, waste in spirit, Conrad stated, making Ernst wish he could dig a hole to hide himself. He then swept his sleeve, turned heels, and walked toward the exit. Led by Kron, the delegation members followed suit, leaving behind the shocked von Grattel kinsmen and women. Seeing Ernst's pitiful state, Augusta shook her head. How was this a man? Clearly, that husband of hers was nothing more than a coward who only knew how to keep his back straight before the feeble. Just a gaze from a mightier being was enough to make him cower on his rear. Compared to that delegation protector, well, they couldn't be compared at all. Were it not for her status and her daughters being bound to him, what need would there be to care for his life? With a sigh, she turned toward Lena, who suppressed any show of frustration. I have a task for you. If you can excel, perhaps all is not lost. Lena's eyes flashed with a strange light, and without shifting her gaze from Conrad, she replied, What is it? Though mighty, that protector's strength cannot surpass the true origin saint level. Otherwise, the Holy Emperor would never send him here to serve as his adopted son's protector. Even if he wished to make a show of force, he would not dispatch an elder whose cultivation approached or surpassed his. Therefore, this is not a situation that we cannot handle. But the premise is that we can snatch him from the Holy Flame Empire and keep him here. Lena's eyes shone with understanding. You want me to seduce him? Yes. Use any trick at your disposal to make him desire you. When he does, thinking of how he must bring you to Adelar von Jürgen, unwillingness and resentment will certainly emerge within his heart. At that time, we can offer him unimaginable conditions to keep him with us. If he stays, so do the tokens. Afterward, we can plot their retrieval. Even if we can't, as long as you can obtain his favor, when you reach the Holy Flame Empire, you'll have someone to rely on. The road to becoming Holy Empress will then be smoother. Since the Von Grattel men were useless, it was time for the women to step up and fix the mess they made. Alas, Augusta failed to realize that she was sending her daughter into a fiery pit. "All right, I agree," Lena replied in a mental message while her eyes shone with determination. But as Conrad reached the gate, a shocking scene occurred. The kowtowing maidservant who'd remained prostrated throughout the whole scene suddenly turned toward him. "Lord, please save me," she begged Conrad while keeping her forehead plastered on the ground. However, Conrad didn't stop, and seeing that he was about to cross the door, the maidservant grabbed his right leg, stopping him in his tracks. "Lord, please save me," she repeated while clinging onto Conrad's thigh. Her move startled both the Von Grattel and the delegation members who'd not expected that anyone would be bold enough to touch a corner of Conrad's clothes, much less grab him. Chapter 199, Surrendering the Country Part 2. The nerves! Kron roared, but before he could take action, Conrad raised his hand, stopping him in his tracks. His eyes then fell onto the girl whose face he'd not properly examined beforehand. Ordinary was the best way to describe this girl. While among the commoners, her beauty was undoubtedly above average. In a sea of refined nobles and cultivators, she couldn't stand out. The only thing worth mentioning was her freckled face, a rare sight in the ancient crystal world. "Why should I save you?" The Water Alliance King is a notoriously petty and narrow-minded man who excels at bullying the weak. Now that his son died in such a wretched manner, and his face sweeps the floor, he will certainly seek someone to vent his anger on. He doesn't dare trouble you, but he dares pummel me. Just because I'm insignificant, why must I pay the price for a matter that has nothing to do with me? I don't deserve this. Were I mighty, why would I need to endure this? I'm unwilling to die like this." The freckled maidservant's eyes shone with a startling mixture of rage, unwillingness, and determination. Hearing her words, the Water Alliance King's cheeks burned with shame, and firmly believing that Conrad wouldn't pay attention to this average-looking maidservant, he decided to vent his frustration. "What are you waiting for? This girl is obviously crazed. Guards, take her to the dungeons," he roared, and the guards that awaited on the outside stepped in. However, with a gaze from Conrad, they bowed, and with cold sweat, returned to their post. Baffled, the Water Alliance King didn't know what else he could do. So, he just sat there, slack-jawed. "You misunderstand. I'm not asking why you need saving. I'm asking why I should save you. What do I stand to gain from this? Or are you so delusional as to think me a good person?" Conrad asked while lowering his eyes back onto the freckled maidservant. "I'm someone who kills as he pleases, without batting an eyelid. Many who didn't deserve death died by my hand, because their deaths pleased me." His lips curled into a fiendish smile. "If your death pleases me, or serves my purposes, dying is your only road. And while I don't find your death appealing, I don't find your life worth saving either. So, if you want my help, you must give me a good reason." Hearing such ferocious words, the freckled girl trembled. However, her determination remained, and unwavering, she declared, "We only have one life. No matter how short, no matter how long, it is our most valuable possession. When it joins us, we live. When it leaves us, we perish. I offer that life to you, my existence and allegiance, throughout eternity. Today, it may not be worth much, but who is to say that in the future I won't prove your soundest investment? As long as you give me the opportunity, I will not shirk from fire and storms, and always strive to give more than my hardest. I may not know much about the cultivation world, but as an expert that can put the royal family on its knees with just your presence, your strength and knowledge can't be low. With your guidance, I can certainly embark on the road of cultivation. If others cultivate for 1 hour daily, I will cultivate for 6. If they do 3, I will do 18. Letting go of Conrad's thigh, the freckled girl clasped her hands and bowed in a solemn pledge. "Why 6 times? Why not 10? Because I know my body cannot take 10, and I dare not kill myself without your permission." The freckled girl seriously replied, causing a laugh to escape Conrad's lips. Good. Then rise. Henceforth, you are my person, and your life belongs to me. Thank you, Lord. The freckled girl thrice kowtowed, and as Conrad turned heels, she rose to follow him wherever he went. Sweeping the royal palace with his spiritual sense, Conrad located the treasury, and with the delegation members at his heels, he stepped toward it. The treasury was a large building of its own, protected not by men, but by a profound formation that could repel even fate-wrestling saints. Without the key, getting inside was a daunting task. Conrad waved his hand, causing the silver key to fire a bright ray that dived into the treasury's lock and unsealed it. The towering gate then opened in a grating sound that alarmed the Von Grattel royals that still remained in the banquet hall. He's really entering the treasury. Cold sweat filled the Water Alliance King's forehead as he realized his house's thousands of years of accumulations were about to suffer massive damage. Hopefully, he isn't too greedy. Hopefully, divine lords, please help. The Water Alliance King didn't often pray, but on this particular occasion, his heart was full of zeal, and he prayed all the 5 cardinal lord to save his state from an economic disaster. But since Conrad came to plunder, his prayers were bound to go unanswered. With a sweep of his spiritual sense, Conrad assessed the treasury's coffers, and the result was indeed quite satisfying. In terms of holy crystals, the Central Water Kingdom couldn't compare to Isen, having only 250 holy crystals. Conrad estimated that even if they pooled the holy crystals of the other 14 states, they couldn't surpass 500,000. After all, the Central Kingdom was by far the strongest of the 15, comparable to several others combined. However, when it came to artifacts, pills, and elixirs, they didn't disappoint. The treasury still contained 2 mid-grade holy artifacts, 15 low-grade holy artifacts, and a massive quantity of pills and elixirs. There were also 11 war puppets of the holy rank, among which 3 fate-wrestling saint war puppets stood. As for semi-holy war puppets, there were 50. Unlike soul puppets which, as the name implied, were powered by souls, war puppets fed on crystals. With his current net worth, Conrad could put them to good use. As for the billions of purple crystals, they would also serve him well. Conrad raised his emerald bracelet and sucked the entire treasury within, not leaving anything behind. He then took his leave, and alongside his servants, returned to his quarters, leaving the gate wide open for all to see. 10 minutes following his departure, led by their king, the royal family arrived to access the damages. Aya! Some exclaimed in fright. With the gate being wide open, all could clearly see what remained. And Ernst, who stood at the helm, couldn't believe his eyes. Staggering, he walked into the empty treasury, his eyes vacant, and his body without strength. Nothing remains. He's really that greedy. He really took everything, not leaving us any way out. Without money, we can't pay the officials. Without money, we can't pay the soldiers. Without money, pills, or elixirs, we can't provide the required resources to handle the house's cultivation needs. At the same time, the army tokens and royal seal are in his hand while the various state rulers are, unbeknown to them, on their way to surrender. Ernst trembled and dropped onto his knees, his eyes still vacant. We surrendered the army, surrendered the wealth, surrendered the authority. Now, even if we pawn ourselves, our decline is inevitable. House von Grattel's 50,000 years of glory, ruined in my hands. The blow too hard to bear. Ernst collapsed on the floor, his body convulsing in a seizure. Chapter 200 Mutual Obligation Contract. Following the return to their quarters, Conrad assigned his delegates various tasks meant to hasten the royal palace's cleanup. 10th Elder, tonight, your task is simple. Enforce the allegiance of the Royal Guard Commander and his top captains. Conrad ordered while delivering a batch of orchids. As you command, Master. The 10th Elder bowed, before turning into a beam of light and shooting toward the Royal Guard Commander's mansion. As for the other delegates, they carried similar tasks. Kron returned to his quarters, leaving only Cobra Yvonne, Conrad, and the freckled girl. "What's your name?" Conrad asked, ending the brief moment of silence. Forget it. From now on, your name is a start." Cut before she could properly introduce herself, the freckled girl was startled. Still, she regained her composure and bowed with clasped hands. "Thank you, Master, for bestowing a name." Conrad then re-examined her while circling her body, the indifference within his eyes making a start unable to know whether she should feel delight, shame, or fear. "You need some physical readjustments. Otherwise, in the future, you might not fit in." Astarte, who didn't understand the meaning of Conrad's words, blinked in incomprehension. "What are you?" "Shush. Hold still." Again, Conrad cut, and without further ado, he cupped Astarte's cheeks into his hands. Purple mist coated his palms as he kneaded her cheeks, nose, lips, and forehead. Astarte wanted to inquire on what the hell was going on through her new master's mind, but since he required silence, she restrained herself. Conrad's following move made her restraint hard to maintain. His hands lowered to her breasts, which he copiously kneaded, just like her face. A yelp escaped her lips, and her cheeks flushed in shame. Unable to shoulder the sight, she closed her eyes, surrendering to the ministrations. Conrad's eyes showed no lust, only the professionalism of a crafter working on his new piece. With a yank of Astarte's shoulders, he turned her on 180 degrees, making her face the wall as he tended to her rear. Wherever his hand went, she could feel a strange force spread through her body, causing a comfortable sensation to soothe her from within. "Done," Conrad stated and stepped back to admire his work. "What did you?" Astarte began. Feeling her chest heavier and her hips wider, she couldn't help but wonder what sorcery had been used on her body. But before she could finish her words, Conrad waved his hand, summoning a large 2 meters tall mirror which landed right before her. "See for yourself. I never had to do this before because it was never necessary, but for a first try, I must say I'm quite proud of myself." Seeing how Conrad stroked his beardless chin in a show of self-satisfaction, Cobra Yvonne rolled her eyes. And as she stared into the mirror, Astarte was flabbergasted. Failing to recognize the reflection that stood before them, her eyes widened in disbelief. "Is that me? How could it be?" She stuttered. Though the freckles and facial features were similar, the woman in the mirror stood leagues above the previous her in terms of beauty. The face was masterfully carved with perfect, full lips and a lovely pair of almond-shaped, hazel eyes. Her already slim nose and waist didn't change much, but they looked more entrancing. Meanwhile, her butt was not only rounder but curled upward. If that wasn't enough, her chest now easily filled a DD, while her auburn hairs shone with a luster of their own. The girl went from average to peerless in less than 5 minutes. Even Yvonne was forced to admit that she'd not expected such a shocking transformation. "How did you, can all experts achieve this?" Astarte asked in stupor, causing Conrad to negatively shake his head. "I'm afraid this is a family trade, transmitted only from father to son." Though stronger at the Phantasm Lord level, flesh transformation was actually a Dreamweaver ability. However, Conrad never had a reason to use it beforehand. Thank you, Master." Human beings all cared about their appearance in a way or another. Though she wasn't vain, it would be a lie to say Astarte wasn't delighted to see herself turned into a mortal goddess. You can think of it as my first gift. Now, let's discuss proper business. I have already assessed your cultivation talent, and it is very low. You have a blue human bloodline. Though enough to step onto the cultivation path, without additional chances, your future achievements will be minimal. At best, you can reach the arch rank in a lifetime. Completely useless. Conrad callously began, and as he spoke, he analyzed Astarte's reaction. Seeing that though distressed, she didn't lose her determination, he nodded and carried on. "To remedy that, I can offer you a mutual obligation contract. As long as you fulfill my terms, you will receive the listed benefits. The contract ends when both parties' terms are fulfilled. My terms will be straightforward. Unending growth. Until you reach a certain cultivation level, you cannot stagnate and forever must keep progressing. If your progress stops before that level, the contract ends, and I get back all I gave you, your life included. As for the cultivation level, only I can know the rank. Are you willing? The startling words took Astarte aback. But having reached this point, how could she willingly persist in mediocrity? This was not an opportunity. It was the opportunity. The one that knocked only once in a lifetime. Regardless of cost and consequences, she wouldn't let it go. I am willing, she exclaimed, the unwavering determination clear within her voice. Good. Conrad stretched out his hand, summoning demonic circles out of thin air. With his index, he drafted the contract in demon language, causing lines of purple, eldritch characters to appear before Astarte. Again, she was startled, and this time, feeling the demonic force filling the room, she couldn't help but suffer anxiety and apprehension. Having heard of demons tempting mortals with promises of wealth, power, and beauty, and recalling both Conrad's supernatural ability and the word contract, a dreadful thought emerged within her mind. Could you be the king of hell? Am I selling my soul to a demon? Astarte asked, her entire body shivering as she struggled to restrain her fears. For now, I'm just an heir to the throne, Conrad seriously replied, dumbfounding the human girl. Though, I must confess that you're not selling your soul yet. In the infernal realm, selling one's soul to a high-ranking demon noble for eternal servitude was a privilege many fought for. After all, those contracts often came with mighty boons for the servants, while a direct connection to a high-ranking demon triggered a status leap. For example, not many infernal gods could disrespect even the lowest of Tauratha's contracted servants, and those who could possess too high a status to find the need to. At the same time, high-ranking demons were very picky with their contracted servants, only choosing those with at least the potential to reach godhood, and testing them through mutual obligation contracts. Finding someone who, like Conrad, handed out master-servant contracts like candy was unheard of. And while he'd not been raised in hell, Conrad was starting to realize the need to rarefy his contracted servants. In any case, he already had the phantasm orchids to enforce obedience. Chapter 201 Quasi-Fiend Creation. Astarte didn't expect that she'd end up surrendering herself to the bogeyman of her childhood. Still, having reached this point, she couldn't falter. A new wave of determination welled up within her chest, and as the contract's drafting ended, she stared deep into Conrad's eyes. What do I have to do? Place a drop of blood on the contract. Nodding, Astarte cut open her thumb, then pressed it on the demonic contract. The letters glittered and dived in her forehead to lodge themselves in her soul. Her eyes shone with purple light, and although the bloodline level hadn't changed, Astarte's cultivation talent and comprehension rose to brand new heights. Moreover, she obtained Conrad's origin sight and a unique physique. A physique high-ranking demons could bestow, but never possess. The infernal armament physique. The first step to becoming a fiend. Humankind was the most malleable race within the three realms. In ancient times, fiends were born from mighty demons experimenting on human beings, granting them aspects of demonism, twisting and overloading their bloodlines with infernal energies and unwittingly triggering the creation of the infernal armament physique. The height of a fiend's bloodline level entirely depended on its demon creator. The higher the creator's bloodline level, the more powerful the fiends would be. Thus, although they could never rival their creator's bloodline level, the mightiest fiends, those created by the demon primogens, often surpassed the average high-ranking demon in terms of bloodline level. Meanwhile, the infernal armament physique not only provided them with dreadful strength, speed, and resilience, but it also drew from the demon master's essence to grant them a demonic weapon similar to their creator's lineage weapon. In Astarte's case, it would, of course, be a war hammer, and while she still had no cultivation level, the formidable strength coursing through her veins convinced her that she could lift mountains. Still, without the bloodline transformation and aspect granting, she, at best, qualified for a quasi-fiend. Thank you, Master, for your blessings." Overflowing with emotions, she exclaimed and fell on her knees. In her mind, Conrad had already turned into an idol, a supernatural patron who in less than 1 hour completely transformed her life. "Don't thank me so soon. For now, I withhold the other half of your boons. When I deem you worthy, you shall receive them." Meanwhile, a set of mnemonics flew from his mind to hers, embedding themselves in her soul. Those were the mnemonics of a unique cultivation method he'd exchanged for her. "This is the Battle Lust scripture. For now, I give you the semi-holy rank version and will give you the higher ones as you progress. With this method, your growth pace depends on how much you fight. When you condense your battle will, your strength will sharply rise." Astarte no longer had words to express her thanks, so she just kowtowed and renewed her pledge of eternal allegiance. With a mental message, Conrad contacted one of the semi-saint delegates who soon appeared within the room. "Greetings, Master. You take her out on a night hunt. Her targets are low-level arch-rank experts, preferably in groups of 3 or 4. Help her locate the targets and prevent foreign interference. Besides that, do not help her in the slightest. If she can't defeat her foes, she can die." "As you command, Master." Astarte, who was starting to think of Conrad as a good person, was immediately disillusioned. The Master did not lie. In his eyes, innocence really had no worth. As long as someone's death served his purposes, their blood would flow, guilty or not. As the reality settled within her mind, she inwardly pledged to become a blade of unequaled value within Conrad's heart. Then, alongside the semi-saint, she left for the hunt. Right now, her new physique only grants her 10,000 kilograms of arm strength, roughly equivalent to a third-step arch knight. Moreover, she has no battle experience, making her hunt down groups of low-level arch-rank experts. "Are you not sending her to her death?" Yvonne asked in incomprehension. While she could see that Conrad's actions stemmed from high expectations, she failed to grasp why he put such lethal pressure on a girl he'd just lifted from hell to heaven. If she can't even pass this test, she might as well not live. Odd. Why do you treat her so differently from all others? Hearing this, Conrad closed his eyes and lied onto the bed. "Because she somehow reminds me of someone." His mind then drifted to a scene that lied buried within his soul. In a dark, rainy night, the Earth version of Conrad wobbled on one knee with blood flowing from his abdomen. "To think that I perish not for the things I did, but for the things I can do, a pity. There really is no justice in this world." He sighed while 7 men wearing Kevlar vests and black helmets surrounded him with firearms. "Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. Who knows, you might even survive for a few weeks. After all, they first need a thorough examination of your abilities," said the team leader while keeping his rifle aimed at Conrad. "Were I mighty, why would I need to endure this? Unwilling. I'm really unwilling." Alas, wallowing in unwillingness is the privilege of the feeble. "Oh, by the way, I'm pretty sure I screwed your wives." As the flashback ended, Conrad's eyes opened to Yvonne lying by his side, eyeing him with her Hessenite hues. For a silent hour, they stared into one another's eyes, not saying a word. The quiet exchange would have carried on, were it not for the knocking sound that disturbed the moment. Knock, knock, knock. Their eyes shifted toward the door, behind which they could feel a maidservant's presence. "Lord Protector, please forgive the disturbance, but the eldest princess wishes to see you." "Oh, is that so?" Conrad's lips curled into a fiendish smile, and he turned toward Yvonne, who grinned with impish glee. "Well, it seems like I will soon have a new sister. Do go easy on her." "Tonight or tomorrow? Since we're only here for a few days, the sooner, the better. Let's go with tonight." "Deal." They bumped fists, and he kissed the right corner of her lips. "Tell the eldest princess to wait for me within the courtyard. I'm on my way," he told the maidservant who patiently stood at the door, before rising from the bed and heading out. With several leisurely steps, Conrad appeared within the courtyard, and there, Lena, the eldest princess, awaited. This time, she wasn't dressed in her royal golden dress. Instead, she wore a blue, laced, backless maxi dress that perfectly highlighted her curves and showcased her cleavage. "Good effort," Conrad inwardly commented and stopped before her with his arms crossed beneath his back. "Greetings, princess. I'd say blue suits you, but I'm sure you must have heard such perfunctory compliments at least 1,000 times, so I will just let my entranced gaze express my thoughts." Conrad jested, pulling a mild laugh from Lena's lips. "The compliment's value depends on the person. As long as they come from you, protector, even perfunctory ones are a delight to the ears." Chapter 202, Diving into the Wolf's Denver. While the sight of Conrad's purple hues captivated Lena's eyes, his lips curled into a smile. "In that case, allow me to say that you look ravishing." With a bright smile, Lena curtsied. "Thank you, protector. Now that the pleasantries are out of the way, may I know why you wish to meet me in the dark of night?" Conrad asked, his jesting tone replaced by a serious, inquisitive one. "I wanted to apologize, and if possible, dispel our misunderstandings," Lena politely replied, with her fingers crossed and her breasts squeezed between her arms, thus enhancing her cleavage's view. Still, Conrad's eyes didn't shift from hers. "Oh, please elaborate." "During the banquet, I didn't mean to antagonize you. I hope you can understand that both my father's life and my country's reputation were at stake. Therefore, I could only adopt that stance." She began in an apologetic tone, and Conrad nodded. "Moreover, though narrow-minded, my father is, after all, a seasoned cultivator with more than 1,000 years of experience and centuries of reign. Even if he wished to poison you, there is no way he could have used something as strong and instantaneous as what caused my second brother's death. Therefore, in one way or another, someone anticipated his move and tempered with your plate, hoping to blow the matter into what it currently is. That much is a fact," Lena added while seeking answers within Conrad's gaze, but she was disappointed to see that no ripple flashed on his face. According to her mother, Augusta, and her own observations, Conrad was the most likely culprit. How he accomplished it, however, was what they failed to understand. Again, Conrad nodded, his smiling face undisturbed. "I naturally understand these truths, but as a holy flame dignitary, I have my country's face to preserve. Using such opportunities to wrest more benefits is how politics is conducted. As our future crown princess and empress, I hope you can learn from this event and avoid falling into such traps in the future." With a gracious bow, Conrad turned heels, startling Lena, who'd not expected such a prompt departure. Men usually battled for the opportunity to admire her from afar. Why was it that this one looked so unimpressed by her charms? Before Conrad could take another step, she held onto his sleeve. "Please wait. As part of my apology, I wish to show you the royal palace's attractions." "Oh, sure thing. After you, then," Conrad replied while freeing himself from her grasp. Taking the lead, Lena led him through the royal palace. Though they seemed to be at a walking pace, their speed had already surpassed 50 kilometers per second. With a few steps, they arrive at one location which Lena would jovially introduce before moving toward another one. This carried on until they dived into the inner court and stopped before the 5 meters tall statue of a riveting woman holding a vase from which water poured into the fountain below. Seeing that woman, Conrad was startled while Lena's eyes shone with adoration. Does the Lord Protector recognize this woman? How could I not? Throughout the Holy Continent, who doesn't know the face of the Celestial Church's founder? And do you know her background? Conrad shook his head, his ignorance brightening Lena's smile, who stepped closer toward him before carrying on. Though our ancestors' position in the Celestial Church was quite low, we, after all, originate from there. Therefore, I know a bit about the Celestial founder's background. Her name was Isilia. From her mother, she descends from the Warden, while her father is an existence that in his time shook the celestial realm, the great primal ancestor, founder of righteous dual cultivation. Conrad's eyes shone with surprise. Her story is a tragic one. Though born with incomparable beauty, talent, and status, she failed to fulfill the most elementary of a woman's heart's desires, to bring her love story to a good end. She fell for the most overbearing of the infernal realm's 7 stars, the infernal founder, Marduk. A pity that their forbidden union not only bore fruits but caused her father's demise. Again, Conrad's eyes widened. The great primal ancestor is dead? Lena nodded. If Marduk received the Overlord's protection, the same couldn't be said for Lady Isilia. In such matters, women always carry the most blame. Leading gods of the celestial realm and members of the Warden's house were adamant on putting her to death. The great primal ancestor single-handedly battled all those mighty gods and killed many of them, making godblood drench the celestial realm's sky, and thus forcing the Warden to make an appearance. While the great primal ancestor was in existence on the Cardinal Lords and Infernal Kings level, before the Warden, he could raise no storm. Still, since he was born from heaven's origin, the Warden couldn't kill him without repercussions. Meanwhile, the Overlord's shelter of the Infernal Founder elicited outrage from many mighty infernal figures. And for some reason, Marduk went mad and attempted to kill the Southern King, Tauratha's eldest son and head of the 7 infernal stars, Malkam. Thus, antagonizing Taurath, who'd remained neutral till that point. Therefore, in a grand summit gathering the Overlord, the Warden, the Infernal Kings, and the Cardinal Lords, in exchange for the great primal ancestor's life and the joint captivity of the twins, a compromise was made. I believe you know the rest. Conrad nodded. They were banished here to spread the faith and ended up killing one another for the futile hope of keeping their children safe. But why are you telling me all this? Because on this particular night, as I wonder what can push a woman to harm her bright future for the sake of a lethal tryst, I feel especially close to the celestial founder. Lena muttered and turned toward Conrad, who could see the light of yearning flashing within her eyes. And why is that? He asked, as if unable to see through her thoughts. Because my heart. No, I want you, she declared, her mesmerizing blue eyes intently staring into his purple hues. You appeared like the fulfillment of my dreams. From the moment I saw you, I knew that in this life, there could only be you. While not losing eye contact, she stepped forward, her face an inch away from Conrad's. I like your natural overbearingness that puts the men surrounding you to shame. Your eyes whose beauty transcend this world, your decisiveness, your unconcealed heartlessness, your acknowledgement of your evil self, and all the things I have yet to find out. Conrad frowned, his eyes betraying a perturbed look. But you are. I know. Leaning in, she let herself drop on Conrad's chest and wrapped her arms around his back, her warm, hefty chest pressing him. I'm your future crown princess. Between you and I, there can never be anything. However, I cannot contain my feelings, because I know I will never find another like you. Her grip tightened around Conrad's back while unwillingness to let go shone within her eyes. At that time, her half-mermaid scent attempted to invade his senses. In the classification of races, mermaids belonged to the bewitching clans. While their bewitching abilities couldn't compare to succubi, they were still substantial. Of course, with his bloodline level, such tricks held no sway on Conrad. Still, he couldn't let that break the act. As if resisting the urge to embrace Lena, his arms trembled while his heart beat faster. Could you let me sing for you? I wish to let my songs tell you how deep in my heart you lodged yourself. Lena whispered, following what she saw as his inner struggle. And there it was. As you wish. Letting go of Conrad, she stepped back, sitting by the fountain to begin her chant. For some reason, the mesmerizing tune that followed perfectly meshed with the echo of trickling water by her side. And concealed within that tune, Conrad could feel an enthralling force attempting to overwhelm his senses and lead him into Lena's arms. So he just followed the scheme, and as if driven by instinct, stepped toward her and lowered his face onto hers. Even as his lips brushed hers, Lena's singing went uninterrupted. Only when she saw the flaring desire within Conrad's eyes and felt his palm on her cheek did she stop. Leaning in, She took his lips into hers for an ardent kiss. A fatal mistake, because as their tongues intertwined, and his demonic saliva dripped into her throat, she could feel her body heating up with an eruption of lust. The script went wrong. Alarmed, she attempted to free her lips from Conrad's. But at that time, the orchid scent he restrained erupted with its full might, overriding her mermaid aura and overwhelming her senses. "You're right. I'm overbearing. Since you made me want you, then I must have you. Whose betrothed you are is absolutely inconsequential," Conrad declared after breaking the kiss. Still, he held Lena's chin between his right thumb and index. What are you?" she stammered, her cheeks flushed red, and her eyes glazed with lust. Conrad's lips formed a devilish smile as purple mist emerged from his pores to dive into Lena's. "Wrong question, but I'm still going to give you the right answer. When you feel the need to scream my name, remember, it is Conrad." Conrad replied with his eyes shining with purple, demonic light, and Lena finally realized she'd thrown herself into the wolf's den. Worse, it was now evident that from the beginning, they were being schemed against. However, she couldn't give those thoughts much attention because as Conrad's eyes peered into hers, she could not resist the desire to pounce onto him and shred his clothes. Chapter 2033 for the price of one part 1. Forgetting all decorum, Lena grabbed Conrad's collar, shredding it in a brisk, tearing sound before forcing him out of his robe. The robe dropped onto the ground, revealing a physique that transcended the combination of the most outstanding traits between Adonis and Hercules. Aware of his prey's plight, Conrad freed her of her dress, albeit with more sophistication. The anticipation created by his hand unstrapping her dress strings moistening Lena's nether regions, and thinking of how she was about to be defiled under the celestial founder's gaze, she couldn't help but tremble from a mixture of shame and excitation. Unhurriedly, Conrad lowered the blue dress from her shoulders to her feet, and even as he reached her knees, his eyes had never left hers. Lena's body was thus bared to the night. Her breasts wore no garments and bounced free to Conrad's delight. Meanwhile, her crotch was still covered by laced underwear that required prompt removal. In the same tantalizing slow manner, he lowered her panties, setting them aside before standing to admire the magnificent body that surrendered to overflowing lust. Conrad's rod rose to action, towering before Lena, whose eyes widened at the sudden meat expansion. And although she'd received formal training on how to serve her future husband, theory and practice were different, after all. But then, her eyes made a brief turn between Conrad's eyes and rod. All hesitation thus vanished, and she gripped the base of his meat lance within her hand, lubricating it with her spit. She gave it a few slow pumps, but then realized that just stroking was not enough to satisfy the voracious hunger devouring her from within. Therefore, she directly took it into her mouth, letting her new sense of debauchery replace her sentience and guide her as she took it all the way to the hilt. Slurp. A loud, gulping sound echoed while Lena gagged on Conrad's shaft. Spreading her legs, she brought her fingers on her clit, rubbing it as she went up and down Conrad's shaft at an increasingly rapid pace. "Let me take care of that." Conrad opened his mouth, sticking out his demonic tongue which, at Lena's shock, expanded until it reached 1.8 meters in length. Before she could react, the elongated tongue wrapped itself around her body, enlacing her breasts, waist, and hips. It then pulled her hand aside to fall on her flower butt, flicking itself over it before climbing toward the clit and teasing it with masterful expertise. Pleasure and lust then took over, and disregarding the strange sight, Lena fell on her knees, focusing on her cocksucking duty while Conrad's tongue toward her breasts, nipples, hips, and snatch. The licentious sounds they produced soon eclipsed the fountain, with Lena swallowing Conrad's rod as if her life depended on it. The rod throbbed within her throat, announcing the arrival of Conrad's peak. Alas, Lena's own body could no longer resist the demonic tongue. Her eyes rolled back, and she climaxed on Conrad's extended tongue. But as she recoiled from the orgasm's intensity, Conrad forced her back onto his rod with a pull of his right hand and released his spunk down her throat. Ah, he groaned, before letting go of the gagging princess. She collapsed against the fountain walls, legs wide open and eyes dazed. With a fiendish smile, Conrad retracted his tongue and beckoned. A vast surge of telekinetic power lifted Lena from the ground, aligning her with Conrad's still erect shaft. Activating the 100-flower scripture, Conrad established the mind meld and, for once, used it to peruse his partner's thoughts. Oh, so it was Mom's idea? TSS, TSS, TSS. Golden and purple light erupted from his shaft, and before Lena could reply, the telekinetic force impaled her on Conrad's rod, breaking her hymen in one go. Oh, oh, oh. A succession of animalistic groans flew from her lips as the dual lights spread within her and turned her invaded cave into a maelstrom of violent pleasure. Subconsciously, she wrapped her arms around Conrad's neck and her legs around his waist, folding around him like a butterfly before starting her frantic ride of his meat rod. I say, we pay her a visit. My harem lacks a mermaid. Conrad spread his spiritual sense across the royal palace, locating Augusta, who currently enjoyed a nocturnal bath within the royal bathhouse. With one hand around Lena's waist, he stepped forward, turning into a beam of light to shoot toward the bathhouse while Lena carried on with her self-fucking. In less than a second, they reappeared within the royal bathhouse, the sudden flash of light alarming Augusta, who remained in her mermaid form. Who duh? But before she could finish her words, Augusta was shocked by the sight of a towering, naked mortal god having his massive robe ferociously mounted by a silver-haired beauty she could effortlessly recognize as Lena, her daughter. Undisturbed by the change in scenery, Lena kept smacking her bubble but on Conrad's shaft, her juice flying and tumbling onto the ground in a depraved mess. Conrad, Conrad, Conrad! She roared in unbearable bliss and again climaxed, this time on his shaft. Devoid of strength, her body went limp and would have dropped onto the ground were it not for the support provided by Conrad's arm. Laying her onto the ground, he then let his eyes fall onto Augusta, who was still recovering from her shock and failed to assess the situation. Greetings, new mother-in-law, soon-to-be harem member. A complicated relationship, I must say. Conrad greeted with a fiendish smile. Lena would have never compromised her impending marriage with Adelar von Jürgen by offering herself to you. What did you do to her? A frowning Augusta asked while rising from the water to float above the ground with her mermaid tail brushing it. Following all her bold declarations, I'm forced to disagree. Conrad shrugged while appreciating Augusta's mature body. A brief assessment was enough for her to realize that Lena must have horribly failed in her seduction attempt and had the tables turned on her instead. However, unlike the sixth-step semi-saint Lena, she was a peak-stage profound saint with pure mermaid blood. Therefore, she didn't believe she could succumb to Conrad's tricks. On the contrary, given enough time, he would succumb to hers. Why don't we negotiate? She asked, her voice carrying hidden mermaid melody while her aura permeated the air and assailed Conrad's senses. A true mermaid didn't need to sing, their voice alone enough to bewitch their praise. Oh, what do you offer? Not losing her smile and undisturbed by the sight of her unconscious daughter lying with copious spunk dripping from her lips and flower bud, Augusta carried on the silent seepage of Conrad's senses. Instead of returning to your country and surrendering all your gains to the Holy Emperor, why don't you make this your home? Though non-spirits can't rule independent realms, you can still be a nominal vassal. I can support you in combining 5 states into one and make it your domain. Thus, you can become our country's first sovereign prince while still possessing more power than the king. If that's not enough, we can give you the court title of Grand Preceptor, in charge of all official matters. King in all but name. What do you say? In the Holy Continent, the title of Grand Preceptor was a very dangerous one because its wielder could, in theory, grasp more political power than his monarch. Usually, to avoid trouble, It was conferred to the strongest house elder who nominally held it while focusing on secluded cultivation. In the Holy Flame Empire, the peak stage cross-tribulation saint, Adalwin von Jürgen was the grand preceptor, both in the reign of Ulrich, his father and grandfather. Denied. I have another proposition. Surrender. Bright purple flames erupted from Conrad's body, shattering the hidden melody and mermaid aura within the air to barrel into Augusta. Oh shit, she cursed, realizing that from the beginning, her abilities had no sway over Conrad, who clearly was no human being. And as she attempted to challenge the purple flames, another realization struck her. They didn't bring physical harm. They targeted the mind's desires. Alas, even her profound saint cultivation was not enough to resist their might. In a flash, her suppressed lust erupted, and Conrad turned into the manifestation of all her phantasms. Unable to maintain flight, she dropped onto the ground, and her mermaid slit moistened by the second. Fuck. Oh, for sure. I will fuck you good, Conrad pledged before taking leisurely steps toward Augusta, intent on giving her the pounding of a lifetime. At that time, Lena awoke with her first words being, "Wait, don't forget me." Meanwhile, the third princess was about to join her mother in the bathhouse. However, as she approached, a loud succession of smacking sounds backed by frantic moans echoed from the door. Alarmed, she stopped, for while she possessed no experience in the topic, even a pig could tell what was going on. The possibility of her mother having an affair within the royal bathhouse, forcing her back. Wait, it can't be. Mother is very cautious of gossips. Even if she wanted to carry out an affair, she wouldn't start tonight, or here. It must be someone else. How dare they sully our bathhouse? The nerves. Full of righteous indignation, the third princess stepped toward the door and shoved it open. What she saw startled her. In her mermaid form, her mother laid face down on the floor, eyes rolled back and her tongue lolling out while the delegation protector smacked his hips against her ass, pounding her from above with his massive rod. Meanwhile, Lena sat before her mother, legs spread, and forcing her to lick the spunk that still trickled from her snatch. More. Augusta roared while pulling her face out of Lena's snatch. Mother, don't speak with your mouth full, Lena admonished before pushing Augusta's face back into her snatch. Alarmed by the decadent scene, the third princess yelped and closed the door, her heart rate skyrocketing. Of course, her intrusion didn't escape Conrad, whose lips curled into an amused smile. He then returned to the task of driving his cock into Augusta's mermaid backdoor. Didn't see anything. I didn't see anything. I didn't. The third princess repeated to herself while leaving the royal bathhouse. However, as she reached the exit, she was shocked to see her father standing before her, depression still shining in his eyes. Ah, father, what are you doing here? The depressed Water Alliance king's eyes lowered onto his youngest daughter, too grief-stricken to see the oddities within her gaze. I wanted to chat with your mother and was told she was having a nocturnal bath here. I'm on my way to see her. Knowing that another disaster was about to strike her house, the third princess' eyes widened in fright. But as she floundered, the Water Alliance king walked past her, taking unsteady steps toward the inner bathhouse. Chapter 2043 for the price of one Part 2. Wait, stop. The third princess exclaimed and rushed to stop her father, arms outstretched to bar his path. What do you mean by this? The Water Alliance king asked, perplexed by his youngest's unusual behavior. The third princess wanted to say that she was saving him from the humiliation of a lifetime, but since such words couldn't leave her lips, she refrained. Instead, opting for a more diplomatic approach. Mother specially instructed me that she didn't want anyone to disrupt her. Especially after today's debacle, she just wishes to relax without disturbances. Hearing the words, today's debacle, Ernst floundered. On this day, he didn't just lose his power as monarch and his country's autonomy, most importantly, he lost his face as head of household. Though he grieved the second prince's death, even his demise couldn't compare to that loss of face. Alas, in the hierarchy of the things he cherished, even face only ranked second. The first would always be his life. Therefore, he had to cave in. And imagining the profound disappointment his actions must have elicited in his wife, he sighed and turned heels. Now, Ernst also realized Conrad was the most likely culprit of the setup. However, even if he knew, what could he do? Only when the elders came out of seclusion could he have his revenge. Determined to pull them out, he turned heels, and the third princess who saw his departing form heaved a sigh of relief. Alas, she'd forgotten the efficiency of a saint's senses. Because of a short break caused by the mating group's change in positions, when Ernst arrived, he heard nothing alarming. But as he reached the door, the loud smacking sound resumed, and though the bathhouse was still far from him, his saint-level hearing made it impossible to miss. Clearly able to identify the sound of flesh meeting flesh, he stopped. Yet, he didn't immediately turn back, first letting his ears feed him information. Quickly, he identified another sound, that of messy fluid flying and tumbling onto the ground. Then it came, the sound he absolutely didn't wish to register. Moaning. Two distinct female voices lost in reckless moans. Ernst trembled and turned heels, his eyes bloodshot. "Father, why are you not leaving?" But as she saw the look in his eyes, the third princess realized that the shameful matter was no longer concealable. They were exposed. Paying her no heed, Ernst walked by, and with a succession of large, angry steps, walked toward the bathhouse's door. Seeing this, the third princess was alarmed. Wait, you can't enter." As they approached the door, Ernst stopped, turning toward his daughter with his incensed look unchanged. "Speak true, who is in there?" Seeing the murderous look in his eyes, the third princess floundered. But since things had reached this point, she could only try on overt maneuver. "Father, please have mercy. Eldest sister and her prime attendant are having an illicit relationship with the royal guard commander. To preserve her face and yours, please don't enter." The third princess proclaimed and fell on her knees. Knowing that concealing was impossible, she could only choose a setting her father would willingly avoid. The royal guard commander was his most loyal official and last trustworthy retainer in these chaotic times. There was no difference between exposing him and asking him to join the oppressors. And indeed, the Water Alliance king frowned. Not only did he not want to potentially antagonize his most loyal retainer, but he also profoundly wished that the third princess spoke true. Alas, as the moaning sound rose, it became evident that she deceived him, because effortlessly he recognized his wife's voice, except that the volume she currently produced surpassed anything he imagined her capable of. Blood left him, and he paled with his face losing all color. Still, he turned toward the door handle, his body shivering, and extended his hand toward it. "It can't be, he inwardly repeated to console himself and strengthen his resolve, and while his heart thumped with a mixture of anxiety and dread, he couldn't stop himself. With a brisk move, he pulled the handle and opened the door. His eyes thus fell onto his life's most horrible nightmare. Ah, yes, my Lord Protector, yes." Augusta groaned, bent on two human legs with her hands against the wall, while Conrad hammered her cushy rear from behind. Meanwhile, Lena's cunt was getting played by his masterful fingers as she voraciously kissed his lips and moaned in his mouth. Since they faced the wall, the mating group could see neither Ernst nor the third princess. Not that their presence mattered. The bathhouse overflowed with an odd mixture between the stench of animalistic sex and an orchid fragrance. Seeing a scene arguably more barbaric than the previous one, the third princess didn't know what to say. And Ernst, well, let's just say that his heart was in a terrible place. His bloodshot eyes almost popping out of their sockets, he took several trembling steps into the room. As he walked, his weight seemed to visibly diminish while the erratic drumming of his heart echoed in the ears of the gathered individuals. He didn't care about his daughter getting boned. Daughters would get boned anyways. Her unfaithfulness was her future husband's problem, not his. At worst, It was an uncomfortable sight. However, the woman whose palms clenched the wall while her large breasts and larger, but bounced under violent cock hammering. The woman whose eyes rolled back as she groaned in a crazed display of lust and debauchery. That woman was his wife. As Ernst approached, Augusta, who remained oblivious to his appearance, arched her back, the thought of Conrad's balls marking her ass as his property sending her over the edge. Oh, she climaxed, and at the same time clenched tighter around Conrad's rod, milking him of a massive eruption of spunk like a perfect cum drainer. The sight stopped Ernst's advance, forcing him to recoil and flounder in an awkward stance, not knowing whether to step forward or run. Welcome, Water Alliance King, to our improvised party. I must say I didn't peg you for the watcher type, Conrad said, his words alarming Lena, whose cunt still danced on his fingers. Sent over the edge, she also orgasmed and fell on Conrad's shoulder. Augusta, who'd regained some senses, turned to see her husband and king's corpse-like appearance. But with Conrad's still warm and erect rod teasing her from inside and demanding attention, she felt his presence a hindrance. Forget about him. We still have much exploration to do. Right? I can still go for a few rounds. Both mother and daughter agreed, to the Water Alliance King's dismay. Augusta, how could you with him? Why? Why? After all he did. He's our mortal enemy. Anyone but him. Ernst finally found the strength to roar, causing a laugh to escape Conrad's lips. We're doing this for the kingdom. Having surrendered the army, the wealth, and the authority, only by surrendering the women can we maintain the peace. For the sake of the common people, we must sacrifice ourselves, yes. The more she spoke, the more Augusta felt her words made perfect sense. And Lena agreed with the reasoning. This was to save the state. A perfectly righteous deed. Conrad burst into laughter while Ernst collapsed, his chest pricked by 10,000 daggers. My heart, he dash. Pooh. The largest blood gush in the ancient crystal world's history flew from Ernst's lips to splatter the ground. Arg. Kill. I must kill you. With tears drenching his face, Ernst wailed and summoned his holy energy sword. Oh, really? Are you sure about that? Conrad asked with a smirk, while keeping his right arm around Augusta's waist and his left around Lena's. Undisturbed, he activated his awakened supreme overlord and divine primal physiques, causing vast suppression force to erupt and pin Ernst on the ground. Just a profound saint, not worth mentioning. Before me, such a level is no different than meat on the chopping block. I can hack you at will. Conrad stated while his divine physiques crushed Ernst's bones from within. Seeing how Conrad effortlessly suppressed him while groping his wife and daughter's cheeks, Ernst despaired. If you want to fight, at least, you need a fate wrestling saint cultivation base. Therefore, besides your secluded elders, I'm afraid no Von Grattel can pose me a threat. You only have two choices, force them out of hiding, or thank me for cementing the relationship between our two countries. Meanwhile, lifting Augusta from the ground, Conrad impaled her on his rod while having her face Ernst. I will occupy your royal bedchamber. You won't mind, right? Rage and unwillingness welled up within Ernst's heart, but as his bones shattered beneath the pressure, he knew he could not oppose that despot. Still, having been shamed to this level, was it possible for him to give his permission? Right? Conrad again asked, but this time, his tone and face showed no pleasantry. Only dreadful killing intent remained. Ernst didn't doubt that if he didn't give his approval, he would die on the spot. Terrified, he prostrated himself on the ground. Right, I won't mind. I absolutely won't mind. In any case, life was still his most valuable possession. Do you feel any resentment? I don't dare. My wife and daughter are devoting themselves for the safety of the state and the common people. Such righteousness is hard to come by. I'm ashamed. Conrad nodded. Good. Now, we must carry on with the perfection of our state's relationship. Walking by Ernst, Conrad stopped by the third princess side. Having been exposed to the orchid scent for so long, her priorities had long since changed, and she pinched his left arm to draw attention. Want to join us too? Unable to say the words, she nodded, with her cheeks flushed in embarrassment as she clenched her moistened thighs. No, not you too. Seeing the purest of his daughter offering herself to the fiendish oppressor, Ernst could no longer restrain himself. Sorry, Father, I can't resist him. With a wave of his hand, Conrad trapped the third princess in a wave of telekinetic power, bringing her alongside him to the royal bedchamber to finish the night. It's fine. It's fine. The elders will kill him, then I can kill them. Yes, yes. Determined, Ernst dragged his shriveled form to the secluded elders' hidden quarters to alert them of the situation, unwittingly fulfilling Conrad's needs. Ha 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 ha. Kill them all. Kill them all. Kill them all. As he approached their cultivation abodes, his erratic laughter came to an abrupt end. His pupils dilated, and he collapsed on the floor, frothing at the mouth. Chapter 205, End of the Water Kingdom Alliance, Part 1. With their holy scents covering the vicinity of their cultivation abodes, the 6 von Gradel secluded elders were immediately alerted by both Ernst's arrival and his current state. Startled, they rushed out, descending before him in beams of light. What the hell happened here? Why is His Majesty frothing at our doorsteps? If you ask me, who do I ask? Maybe his mermaid queen finally put a green hat on his head? Less nonsense. For now, take him in for healing. The most senior of the 6 cut, and lifted Ernst with a wave of holy force to bring him back in their quarters. Meanwhile, the third princess enjoyed the comfort of a heartwarming welcome into the pleasure worlds. As she lied naked on her father's bed, Conrad's lips, tongue, and fingers caressed her flower bud while Lena sucked her left nipple, and Augusta tended to the right. With the pleasure wave overwhelming her, shyness and reluctance were quickly set aside for total indulgence in the trio's touch. Ah! Throaty moans flew from her previously innocent lips while the corruption of demonic decadence settled within her mind. Letting go of the third princess' breast, Augusta climbed on top of her face, forcing her to gulp the delicious semen that oozed out of her snatch. Slurp, slurp, slurp. Lust and greed clouded the third princess' rationality as she partook in the meal offered by her mother, enthusiastically devouring her cum-filled cunt. The dual assault of Conrad's tongue and fingers then sent her over the edge. Her thighs clenched around his head, and electrified, she squirted on his face, drenching it with the juicy result of her first orgasm. Not bad, Conrad praised before shifting positions. Rolling on his back, he lied by the third princess' side, his erect lance demanding attention. By the time the mother-daughter trio's greedy eyes fell on his rod, the second one grew and joined the fray. Golden and purple light filled the room while reason ran out of the window to allow primitive instincts to guide the previously stately ladies. As if led by a tacit understanding, they each took their spots. The third princess aligned her unexplored flower bud with the tip of Conrad's first shaft, her expectant eyes staring into his. With her back against her sisters, Lena aligned herself with the second one, while Augusta received the privilege of tending to the balls, suckling them like a babe would his milk. In tandem, the sisters dropped on Conrad's rod, albeit with more difficulty for the third princess who had to force it through her hymen. But as the golden light filled her, she quickly matched Lena's enthusiasm. With her hands stroking Conrad's chest, alongside her sister, the third princess began her ride, the two slamming their round, firm and cushy rears on the demonic phalluses. The pounding then began. The life of terrorizing men and taking their women is really entertaining, Conrad whispered while holding on the third princess' waist to guide her hip moves. Oh, yes, Lord Protector, oh. She groaned while riding herself into another orgasm. You can call me Conrad. But too lost in her frantic ride, the third princess couldn't hear his words. She only knew how to ride him harder, faster, harder, and even faster, and sink her nails into his chest while her tongue lolled out and, alongside her sister, she arched her back in ecstasy. Both princesses curved till their faces stood beside one another. In that profound show of elasticity, they kissed and rode Conrad till he exploded within them. The positions changed, and the hammering resumed. But as he plowed those gripping, wonderful fields, Conrad regretted that no one could immortalize this scene. So he exchanged a recording mirror from the system to make sure the event would not be lost to history. Following 3 hours of guttural moaning and lovemaking, the trio collapsed on the royal bed, leaving aboard Conrad to tour the other royal consorts' bedchambers and bring them into the fold, one hammering session at a time. As morning dawned, he returned to the royal bedchamber, dressed in a simple black robe. One after another, the trio's members awoke. But this time, without lust clouding their reason, they were forced into the reality of the night's deeds. Needless to say, they couldn't face one another. Even the more seasoned Augusta was no exception. Feeling shy now? Cute. Alas, this is not the moment to be wallowing in bashfulness. Hearing those words, both Lena and Augusta's eyes shone with enlightenment. With the deeds and words of the previous night, unless they surrendered to Conrad's camp, death surely awaited them. Augusta didn't fear Ernst, but as a house, the Von Grattel were still more powerful than the Meissner she came from, to say nothing of the misdeed of adultery. Once this was exposed, even her father wouldn't spare her. As for Lena, she endured a similar plight. Even if she found shelter in the Holy Flame Empire, once Adelar von Jürgen realized that his wife's cunt had already adopted another man's shape, her demise was inevitable. Only one road remained. Mother and daughter rose from the bed and fell on their knees. From now on, we belong to you. Please take care of us. Wood that can be carved? Conrad nodded. Let them digest the night's gains. Although his cultivation was still in the transcendent rank, with his awakened divine primal physique, a dual cultivation session with him yielded better results than with tribulation stage experts. Breakthroughs were inevitable. Master, the various state rulers arrived and are, alongside the court officials, waiting within the throne room. Oh, that was fast. Good. After checking something, I will soon be on my way. Conrad turned into a beam of light and reappeared within his chambers where a grievously wounded Astarte lied on the bed. Kobrivon coiled at her side while the semi-saint delegate member that brought her back stood on his knees. Bypassing him, Conrad stopped beside Astarte. Result? We hunted down 5 groups. 8 first-step archknights, 5 of the second step and 2 of the third step. A total of 15 low-level arch-rank experts were all killed by the lady. The delegation member exclaimed, and Conrad nodded in approval. Though the man had pulled her out of the life-threatening condition she previously was in, Astarte's current state was still no laughing matter. Still, she'd regained consciousness, and seeing Conrad stand above her, her lips curled into a smile. Mission accomplished. Thank you, Master, for the origin site. Without it, I wouldn't have been able to do it. How terrified were you? At first very, but after the first clash, it became much easier to control. How did their deaths feel? Bad and good at the same time? Conrad nodded, then placed his hand on Astarte's forehead. Good girl. Demonic healing energy erupted from his hand to spread throughout her body and close her wounds in their entirety. He then extended his hand toward Kobrivon, who again coiled around him before he turned into a beam of light to land at the throne room's entrance. With his hands crossed beneath his back, Conrad stepped inside. His appearance took the officials and 14 state rulers aback. After all, it was Ernst they expected. Undisturbed, Conrad walked past them, crossing the stairs to stop before the majestic golden throne Ernst usually occupied. With a smile, he sat on top of it. A deed that sent the gathering into an uproar. But before protest began, thud, 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 the clattering of dozens of footsteps came from the throne room's entrance, bringing alongside it dozens of elite royal guards, led by the commander in person. The royal guard surrounded officials and rulers with their weapons, forcing them to realize the monarch had been overthrown. And when with a wave of his hand Conrad summoned the royal seal, their assumptions were proven true. Therefore, they kept their mouths shut, awaiting Conrad's next move. Although the state rulers could handle the royal guard, the commander was another story. As for the man who could subdue him, that was even harder to gauge. Greetings, dear officials and various state rulers. I have gathered you all for an important announcement. Effective immediately, the Water Kingdom Alliance ceases to exist. The 15 states merge into one and become the Profane Sea Dynasty. Chapter 206, End of the Water Kingdom Alliance Part 2. It was one of those moments. Following Conrad's earth-shaking announcement, the scene turned into a peaceful breeze where silence reigned, and hearts grew cold. For an instant, the various state rulers stared at the teenage-looking man occupying Ernst's throne, and from their looks, no one could tell what waves swept their hearts. At last, they processed the words, and as they realized Conrad patiently awaited their replies, they knew he jested not. Loads of horseshit. The most senior of the state rulers, a late-stage, profound Saint Paragon spirit roared and stepped forward. Oh, sir, I don't know where you hail from, and I don't care. What your aura signature does tell us is that you're human. And it doesn't take a genius to see you overthrew Ernst von Gradl. Congratulations, but since non-spirits can't be independent rulers, I'm assuming you'll adopt the title of Grand Preceptor to be king in all but name. With his lips curled into an amused smile, Conrad nodded. However, if you think you can force all 15 states into submission, think again. If such a thing could be accomplished before, we wouldn't be here, to begin with. I hope you're not so naive as to think keeping us under house arrest is enough to rob the states. At worst, our elders will have our successors inherit the throne in our name and elect a new alliance king from their ranks. The state ruler exclaimed, and Conrad chortled. At the same time, he summoned the army tokens. Oh, I hope they do. At that time, I can use the excuse of usurpation to clean the house. Hearing those words and seeing how the army tokens were already in his hand, the state rulers trembled. Indeed, since he could seize Ernst's royal seal, how could he not also rob the army tokens? Moreover, you misunderstand. You'll submit willingly. When you leave this room, have no doubt that it is of your own accord that you will coordinate with the state's unification. Meanwhile, 2 beams of light flew into the room, landing before the stairs leading to Conrad's throne. The light dispersed, revealing Kron and the 10th Elder, who immediately fell on their knees. Greetings, Master. Rise. The 2 obeyed, and following another polite bow, turned toward the state rulers. If Kron wasn't someone they recognized, the slouching winged serpent emblem on his robe clearly hailed from the Holy Flame Empire's imperial family. As for the 10th Elder, he was even easier to identify. Could this be Holy Flame's plot? No, something is wrong here. In what world does the 10th von Jürgen Elder call a human being master? Also, where the hell are the von Gradl elders? Damn secluded geezers. Never there when you need them, but always sucking state resources. But as guesses flew within the rulers' minds, Kron pulled out a royal scroll to read its content. 1. The 14 state rulers shall submit seals and treasury keys. 2. The state rulers abandon their royal titles to become Grand Dukes. 3. 35% of domain revenue shall be paid to the capital as taxes on a yearly basis. 4. The construction of talent assessing centers throughout all cities. 5. The assessment of all children's talent upon birth, regardless of background. Cultivators beneath the age of 30 will also have their talents assessed. 6. The delivery of outstanding talents to the capital to receive key training. 7. And the list went on. As they approached the 100th command, the state rulers' faces had long since been distorted by rage. Even if they possessed better self-control ability, no one could listen to such words and retain their calm. 35% of domain revenue and taxes. Demotion from king to Grand Duke. What was this? Shame, that's what it was. You can't possibly be expecting us to accept this kind of drivel, right? Selecting talents regardless of background. Are you trying to break the status quo? 35% of domain revenues and taxes. Are you trying to cripple our growth? Demotion from king to duke. Are you insulting our ancestry? Even if we were to submit to you, as saints, we should at the very least become sovereign princes. How could we possibly become dukes? Right, right, right. The state rulers all proclaimed in indignation, causing Kron and the 10th elder to sneer. Just with your strength. The Holy Flame Empire only has 3 sovereign princes, but each one of them is stronger than all of you combined. With such an abysmal gap, you dare wield the same title? With what face? Are you not afraid of having the world laugh at your conceit? The 10th elder spat, cutting the raging monarchs who felt their cheeks heating up in shame. 10th elder, you can't be too harsh on them. Those wastes have yet to realize that this is not a negotiation. Kron said while his lips formed a fiendish smile. Vast holy force erupted from his body. And although the energy signature showed a peak stage rising saint cultivation base, the intensity pursued the average secular world fate wrestling saint. Instantaneously, the 14 rulers and silent officials were startled. In tandem, they recoiled in fright. But at their backs, the royal guard's spears awaited, and with one wrong move, they'd end up skewering themselves. Cold sweat quickly filled their foreheads. If Master wants to break the status quo, what can you do? If Master wants to recruit talents from the billions of masses that lay unused, what can do? If Master wants you to surrender your crowns and wealth, what can you do? Submit. You can only submit. Kron roared, and the shocking might of his holy force drove the 14 state rulers onto their knees. To say nothing of this, even if he wants you to take the tonsure and parade naked on the street, you still must obey. Utter rubbish. Who the hell do you think you are? Kron spun, turning toward Conrad to drop on one knee. Master, please give the order, and I will immediately have those buffoons corrected. Conrad shook his head and summoned 14 phantasm orchids. First, give them a chance. Those who willingly submit, you can spare. As for the others, do as you see fit. The implications of Conrad's words made Kron, the 10th elder, the royal guard commander, and his captain smile fiendishly. And seeing those demonic, smiling faces, the state rulers wondered if they'd fallen into an infernal court. With a surge of telekinetic power, Kron gathered the 14 orchids and sent them to the former state rulers. You heard the Lord. Whoever swallows his orchid willingly, I won't abuse. Although the situation looked gloom, most of the state rulers believed Conrad couldn't take their lives. At worst, it would be some physical abuse. As members of the spirit race with a revered status, they simply couldn't accept surrendering all they held in such a wretched manner. Therefore, they refused to submit. At least 11 did. The remaining 3 immediately gulped down the orchids. Good. You 3 can step aside. Why, yes. As the 3 moved to the royal guard's side, Kron waved his right hand, causing a spiked energy hammer to appear within. Carrying it, he walked toward the resisting rulers whose eyes widened at the appearance of the terrible weapon. Wait, we can discuss this like civilized people. Right men of culture have no need to resort to such means. No, Too late. Kron cut and raised the hammer around which flames now coiled. In a diagonal, downward move, he smashed it on the eldest state ruler's shoulder, causing the spikes to dig through his flesh, and the demonic flames to wreak horrendous havoc within his body. Warg. Used to a life of opulence, don't know the word difficulty, but want to show backbones before master. If this is not horseshit, what is? The infernal hammer descended in crushing blows, laying the state ruler's body to waste, his blood and bones flying all over the place in a festival of blood and gore while his mournful howls filled the throne room. Meanwhile, the 10th elder brought Conrad a jug of tea which he poured in deference, while the punishment carried on. As Kron finished with the first state ruler, he shifted onto the second one, and then the third and the fourth, all the way to the 11th. By the time he turned toward him, the 11th had already soiled his pants. Still, Kron didn't spare him. No, As for the officials who'd remained silent and attempted to have their presence ignored, they all trembled in fright. The punishment went uninterrupted, and the 11 resisting rulers now laid in a pool formed by their own blood, flesh, and bones. Still, their hearts beat. Kron then waved his hands, causing a massive wave of demonic healing powers to mend the ghastly wounds and restore enough strength for the 11 to return on their knees. The only difference being that now, they couldn't stop shivering. Now, I ask again. Swallowing, yes or no? Yes, yes, yes. Kron needn't speak twice. The 11 all rushed toward their assigned flowers and gulped them down in one go. They then signed the royal order and abdicated both their seals and treasury keys. Kron really couldn't comprehend the fools. Since they knew they were going to submit anyways, why didn't they do so in the first place? Because of them, he wasted precious time, which the 10th elder used to gain points with Conrad by serving him tea. With a dejected sigh, he returned by Conrad's side. You've done well, very well. I'm pleased. Conrad told Kron upon his return, causing his dejected face to turn into a beaming one. Thank you, master. He then cast a condescending look toward the 10th elder, a look that seemed to be saying, See, while you gain small merit by pouring tea, I handle big tasks. At the end of the day, I'm still the boss. The state rulers turned Grand Dukes then started the journey back home, returning at full speed to announce the result of the summit and the unification of the states. As for the resistance, well, it would meet with unfortunate accidents. From the shadows, of course. The Water Kingdom alliance had officially ended, making way for the Profound Sea Dynasty's emergence. Master, what is the next step? The 10th elder asked while pouring another cup of tea. Now, we clean both the elders and the water temple in one night. Conrad leisurely replied between 2 sips of tea. Chapter 207, Nocturnal Retaliation Part 1. While his country underwent drastic changes, Ernst von Gradl awoke within the great elder's quarters. Beside him, the 6 secluded elders stood with their inquisitive eyes locked onto him. Seeing them, Ernst immediately dropped on his knees. Elders, the house has fallen. The country is overtaken. Our rule overthrown and our future in jeopardy. I beseech you to return to activity, cleanse the house and save us from destruction. He exclaimed and kowtowed. Instantaneously, the 6 elders' eyes widened in a glaring stupor. What did you just say? The house, fallen? Our rule, overthrown? What the hell happened in our absence? The great elder roared while seizing Ernst by the collar. This is how it went. Ernst then retold the events, starting with the Great War and following with the arrival of the Holy Flame Empire's delegates. With the situation having reached this point, he didn't dare conceal his involvement in the matter, faithfully retelling all that occurred. Of course, he didn't mention Augusta's fall in details, only stating that upon witnessing his might, she chose to surrender her body to the delegation protector. The 6 were startled. See? I called it. Ernst, back in the days, didn't I tell you that she was more woman than you could handle and would ultimately make your head green? Now, look at this situation. Your head is not just green, but glossy. The 3rd elder lamented with a profound sigh, causing Ernst to suppress a blood spurt. This is not the time for your nonsense. The situation is serious. The 2nd elder cut in a roar of fury before pointing his index at the still kneeling Ernst. Ernst von Gradl, back in those days, I told your father that you were not suited to be a monarch. Not because you're petty, not because you're narrow-minded, but because you are a coward. The 2nd elder's right palm struck Ernst's cheek in a resounding slap. He spiraled and smashed into the adjacent wall with blood trickling from his lips. Still, he didn't dare argue. As the king, as the patriarch, as the leader and culprit, you only had one thing to do: take responsibility. Commit suicide and apology, leaving blame-shifting words such as, I failed to manage my country and provoked this misunderstanding, but I hope our 2 countries' relationship will not collapse because of this. Then, kill yourself, and we could have effortlessly taken care of the rest. But you don't have the gals. You dare commit such a blunder and fall into the enemy's trap, but you don't dare shoulder the consequences. Worse, you brought your house to ruin. Under the verbal abuse, Ernst trembled, and his cheeks reddened from shame. I. But clearly, the second elder wasn't satisfied and sent him reeling with another smack. Before house prosperity, before house glory, what is one individual's life worth? If your father saw you today, how much shame and sorrow would he feel? And how could he possibly call you son? The second elder gave Ernst the face-slapping of a lifetime. And though usually, the great elder would prevent such things from occurring to preserve the monarch's dignity, today, he didn't stop it. Ernst's face soon became worse than a pig's, badly bruised and swollen with blood drenching his lips. Overwhelmed by pain and shame, he passed out. Useless piece of garbage. With a sweep of his sleeve, the second elder turned toward their eldest, who sat with his eyes shut. Eldest brother, the situation is not irremediable. However, we must make a choice. To entirely go against the Holy Flame Empire, yes or no? As he spoke, the second elder's eyes blazed with determination. For those past 50,000 years, there are only two reasons why we managed to maintain our independence. A. The Grand Treaty. B. Internal wars cannot break out without cause. Right now, we are not involved in any war. But once we butcher that protector, we're giving them cause for assault. But fortunately, the Grand Treaty protects us from their semi-saint and above experts. Meanwhile, it is Great Voidland they're currently eyeing. Therefore, there is hope to turn the table. We simply need to act swiftly. First, we openly form marriage alliances with Great Void and the Earth Kingdom Alliance. Second, gathering our three forces for a massive attack, we force Prosperous Wind to capitulate and sign an armistice. Since Holy Flame is eyeing Great Void territory, their elite troops will be at their border and not able to aid Prosperous Wind. After the armistice is signed, Holy Flame either withdraws troops or faces our three combined assaults. Good if it is the former. If it is the latter, we must push them to break the Grand Treaty, then send a delegation to the Celestial Church's headquarters to alert them of the breach. At that time, I really want to see how Ulrich von Jürgen dares act arrogantly. Only in this way can we regroup our losses without suffering heavy setbacks. As the second elder's words ended, the great elder nodded. But the premise is that we can kill him. For this, we must make ample preparations. Send words to the Meissner conclave leader in the Water Temple to inform him of the situation and his daughter's betrayal. Tell him we're willing to forget this slight and have another Meissner daughter be the next king's queen. Our two houses have controlled the Water Kingdom Alliance's political scene for millennia. He will know how to choose. As long as their 4 Fate Wrestling Saints join the 6 of us, we will have a better grasp of this fight. Also, just in case, get ready to activate the defense formations. The last part caused the remaining elders' faces to contort in frowns. Will that really be necessary? Since that protector dares bare his fangs in such a preposterous manner, he must have confidence in his ability to suppress us. I refuse to believe that he's just relying on the von Jürgen behind him. Therefore, we must be cautious. In any case tonight, we remove that malignant tumor and clean the house. House von Gradel's 50,000 years of inheritance will not collapse because of one human peon. The great elder declared and immediately sent mental messages to his most trusted servants. Yes, eldest brother. At that time, Conrad had returned to his quarters, with the 10th elder at his left and Kron at his right. Why do I feel that this is a perfect day to slaughter? Chapter 208 Nocturnal Retaliation Part 2. As the saying went, servants often were at their master's image. Hearing Conrad's sinister words, Kron and the 10th elder felt their chests filled with the need to shed blood. Those old geezers will naturally take action before our departure, preferably within the palace to maximize their chances. Calculating timing, tonight is their most likely option. The two of you will lie in ambush by the water temple. If their fate-wrestling saints depart to join the Von Grattel, you use the opportunity to sneak into the temple and launch a surprise assault. Capture if you can, kill if you can't. Applicable to all genders. In case they refuse to aid the Von Grattel, patiently wait for me to clean the royal palace. We will then take care of them. Yes, master, they replied in tandem. Afterward, Kron cloaked both the 10th elder and his presence. The two then vanished from the scene, shooting toward the water temple. Cobra Yvonne uncoiled herself from Conrad's torso and slid onto the bed where the resting Astarte recuperated. In a twister of dark sand, she regained her human form. According to my knowledge, the Von Grattel Great Elder is a peak-stage fate wrestling saint. He also wields a 6-star holy artifact which can be considered as their house's supreme weapon. Once the two join hands, the average fate-destroying saint must withdraw. The secluded elders also control the defensive formation. With it as support and their combined forces, I'm afraid even the average peak-stage fate-destroying saint would be forced to withdraw. How about letting me break the formation? She asked while lying on her side. However, Conrad shook his head in disapproval. How confident are you? If I don't resort to my lineage weapon or true demon form, 20%. Once I do, though, at least 90. The remaining 10 is just unforeseen occurrences. In any case, this is an opportunity to test the depths of my abilities before the Tower of Rebirth. Following Conrad's words, Yvonne nodded, vanished, and reappeared behind him to wrap her arms around his waist while placing her chin on top of his right shoulder. Do you remember the most basic condition to be my man? To be unparalleled, Conrad softly replied while rubbing his hairs against hers. Hearing this, her lips curled into a smile. Good that you remember. The word defeat can never be associated with my Conrad. I only want to hear invincible and tyrannical victory. Dash. Yvonne declared and bit Conrad's earlobe in a brisk, unexpected move. As she nibbled onto it, he stroked her right cheek with his eyes shut. I will cut off their heads with the sword you gave me and bring them back for celebration. Meanwhile, chaos ran amok within the royal palace's inner court. Having again awoken, Ernst left the elder's quarters to return to his harem, hoping to find solace in his other consorts' bosoms. In any case, Augusta wasn't the only woman he had. Among the dozens of royal consorts and concubines that lied in the inner court, some had not even been sampled yet. Surely, he could use them to regain some semblance of male dignity, especially the crown prince's mother. It had been many years since he enjoyed her embrace. Initially, she was his princess consort and should have become his queen. However, smitten by Augusta, he demoted her to noble royal consort and made Augusta queen instead. Across those centuries, he'd never regretted that move. But now, it felt like the worst mistake of his life. After all, she was a true loyalist. Thinking of how she silently shouldered the humiliation and never blamed him, Ernst rediscovered shame and sorrow. I will apologize for all those years of misdeed, and we will start over. Then when the elders eliminate that hound, I will butcher Augusta and make her queen instead. Thinking of the years of love that awaited, Ernst's pace quickened. In a flash, he arrived before the noble royal consort's palace and dived in. Naturally, no one barred his path, but as he reached her quarters entrance, a startling scene awaited. The crown prince was sitting on the ground, shivering, while his eyes stared at something within his mother's room. The sight of his eldest sons trembling in a never-before-seen fright took Ernst aback. Matter of fact, the crown prince was so shocked that he didn't realize his presence. Alarmed and wondering if something happened to his new favorite, Ernst rushed into the room, dropping onto another nightmarish sight. The crown prince's mother lied on her bed, naked with a large quantity of semen still cascading from her cunt, ass, and lips. Undisturbed, she soundly slept on the cum-drenched bed, arms outstretched with bliss written all over her face. No, no, no. Ernst's eyes almost cracked, but resisting the shock, he shot toward his other consort's quarters. Wherever he went, a similar scene awaited. And after the 12th try, he stopped, forced to realize that Conrad didn't just spend the night with Augusta. He toured the entirety of his harem, leaving no hole unfilled. How can a man be this immoral, this evil? Where is my justice? Sluts, sluts. Ernst wailed, and his madness returned. I must summon the officials, hold court, demote all those sluts to commoners and have them executed. Resolved, Ernst sent the order to gather the officials for a court session. However, Your Majesty, the officials refused to hold a session without the delegation protector's permission, the royal eunuch explained following the task's failure. Ernst blinked in disbelief. Even within my royal palace, especially within your royal palace, that is where he lives. The eunuch then bowed and excused himself, leaving a staggering Ernst to collapse on the floor. At that time, a riveting blue-haired woman whose beauty stood at the summit of the Water Kingdom appeared. Upon seeing her, the images of the previous night reappeared within Ernst's mind, and his stupor vanished, replaced by bottomless shame and hatred. How dare you appear before me? Slut, slut, slut. I will kill you. Summoning his holy energy sword, Ernst shot toward Augusta, intent on taking her life. Originally, she was just passing by. Never did she expect that she would come across Ernst and receive his assault. However, as the sword approached her, Augusta sneered, and her hand jerked forward in a casual palm strike. Before the sword could graze her clothes, Augusta's palm collided with Ernst's chest, sending him flying backward with blood spurting from his lips. Defeated, he tumbled onto the ground, his eyes wide with shock and fear. How could this be? You broke through the true origin saint rank? From the holy force contained within that palm strike, Ernst could clearly feel Augusta's breakthrough. The situation made no sense. According to her current pace, such a breakthrough should have taken at least 2 centuries. What the hell happened? The only variable was, no way, it can't be. Struck by the realization, Ernst floundered. However, the mockery within Augusta's face seemed to confirm his fears. It is precisely as you think. The Lord Protector is not only the god of the carnal arts, but his spunk is full of high-grade nutrients. With such resources, breaking through was simple. Don't try such nonsense again. Otherwise, I won't be this forgiving. In any case, it's not like you would have the courage. With a kick, Augusta sent Ernst flying against a nearby wall and carried on with her walk. His body lodged into the wall, unable to extricate itself. Devoid of strength and at the limit of what he could endure, Ernst raised his bloodshot eyes toward the blue sky and wailed. Heavens! Why did you make Ernst this cowardly? Why does Ernst fear death so? With neither honor, prestige, nor dignity, what is left to live for that Ernst still clings on his miserable existence? Even Ernst can't understand. But Ernst really doesn't want to die. Sanity. It must be because of sanity. And if in sanity Ernst cannot rise, surely in madness he shall thrive. Time flew by in a flash. With Yvonne acting as his protector, Conrad used his divine primal physique to refine the energy gained from the previous night, enhancing it to suit his cultivation needs. Although he lost in quantity, he gained in quality. Condensing the meridians and completing his transformation, he broke through to the 8th step of the Transcendent Night rank. Afterward, he exchanged several 6th circle spells from the system. As night stretched across the palace's sky, dozens of light beams flew from a single point to surround Conrad's mansion. The light beams dispersed, revealing 22 figures of various ages that hovered in the air. They didn't conceal their cultivation, which went from the mid-stage of the True Origin Saint rank to the peak of the Fate Wrestling Saint rank, and the vast concentration of holy force caused the entire royal palace to shiver. At the same time, boundless killing intent erupted from their form to assail Conrad's mansion. To the holy flame thief, I won't speak rubbish with you. Today, you only have 2 roads. Either you surrender your ill-gained wealth and scram, or we mince you into 10,000 pieces. You have 3 breaths to make your choice. Past that time, the Great Elder began. But before he could finish his words, "Shut the fuck up," a voice thundered from the mansion, and in a purple light beam, a blue-robed, 18-years-old-looking man appeared before the saint gathering. With his hands resting on either side of his waist, he leisurely stepped through the air, stopping several meters away from the holy congregation. A group of old geezers eager to meet their maker doesn't need to spout drivel. Stretching out his right hand, Conrad summoned the holy broadsword he'd received from Yvonne and rested it against his shoulder. "When Yama asks you how you perished, tell him Conrad escorted you to hell, and I'm sure you will receive preferential treatment." Chapter 209, Nocturnal Retaliation Part 3. Conceited. Great Elder, no need to waste time with that overconfident wastrel. To arms. The one who spoke was an old man dressed in gold and blue cassock. He was the Water Temple's conclave leader, a late-stage fate wrestling saint, and Augusta's father, House Meissner's patriarch. Following his words, the Great Elder nodded and with a wave of his hand, summoned a blue ocean ruler while the rest of the 22 saints formed a circle around Conrad. Activating his origin sight, Conrad swept the gathered saints. 1 peak stage fate wrestling saint, 2 of the late stage, 3 of the mid-stage and 4 of the early stage. Adding on top of that the 6-star holy artifact and 12 true origin saints, Conrad was forced to admit that this lineup was nothing to scoff at. However, when compared to Ulrich's von Jürgen dynasty or the Holy Flame Church, it was nothing. When compared to the Celestial Church and Infernal Cult, it didn't even qualify as nothing. If such a lineup could bar his path, how could he ever suppress the world? The Water Temple's holy priests stood at the back to cast spells while the Von Gradel exarchs took the vanguard. Led by the Great Elder, 12 light beams shot toward Conrad while at the back. The Water Temple exarch's spellcasting began. "Holy Flame Thief, surrender your life." 9 pairs of white wings sprang from the Great Elder's back while 3 lotus bloomed above his head. At the same time, the power of fate swirled around him in the form of gray fate locks eager to wrest the destiny of the unprepared. Dozens of fate locks flew from the incoming elders to form a suppression force field around Conrad. Feeling the power of fate dive into his body and assail his soul, Conrad sneered. Primal force. The divine primal physique's might erupted, bringing alongside it a vast wave of golden light that snapped the fate locks and freed Conrad of their suppression. Suppression? The supreme overlord physique followed, causing an unending stream of vibrations to spread throughout the air, covering a 300-meter radius within which all became Conrad's to do with as he saw fit. The 22 saints were startled. The Great Elder, in particular, could barely contain his fright. "This is that accursed physique. What is your relationship with Yvonne Voigt?" As a thousands of years old expert, he'd, of course, witnessed the splendor of Yvonne's era. Following the Tower of Rebirth's event, the 15 years old, she willingly joined the army as a foot soldier and caused barbarian blood to litter the earth. Many barbarian experts attempted to murder her from the shadow, but ended up smothered by the crushing might of her supreme overlord physique. Why was that dreadful force appearing on that man? "She's my wife," Conrad replied and spun on 180 degrees. His broadsword drew a dazzling arc, sending a purple light and lightning circle to barrel into the immobilized 12 who struggled to free themselves from his suppression force. Before the purple arc could slam into them, they broke free and with the Great Elder's blue ocean ruler as lead weapon, met Conrad's incoming blow. Although they'd managed to dispel the blow, the violent impact sent the 12 reeling. Only the Great and Second Elders stood still, unmovable like mountains. "Loads of horseshit," the Great Elder roared and raised the ocean blue ruler. The night sky suddenly turned ocean blue, and from it, a deluge brewed. At the same time, the conclave exarchs at his back finished their spell casting. 6-circle spell. Flood? The 10 priests roared in unison, causing dozens of ocean blue circles to illuminate the night sky. The royal palace had long since risen from sleep, the commotion too hard to ignore. Although the elders used force field to prevent the noise from leaving the palace, they didn't stop it from reaching the royal palace's denizens. After all, they wanted them to know what would happen to those that disrespected House von Grattel and its rule. Gargantuan sea waves bloated the night sky, alarming all who lied on the ground. It didn't take a genius to see that if Conrad couldn't shoulder that blow, at best, the royal palace would receive massive casualties. At worst, they would all perish. But seeing the mighty wave that stretched across several miles, Conrad's smile remained undisturbed. A crazed glint flashed in his purple eyes while lightning, and rose petals hovered around his form. Six-circle spell, searing sky. Red clouds spread throughout the night, smothering the blue and causing a deluge of firestorm to descend from the heavens and collide with the flood. Steam bloated the sky as the two forces met in an earth-shaking collision. Alas, the combined forces of the 10 holy priests ended up overwhelming Conrad's searing sky. Though weakened, the flood carried on, its shocking might begging for his life. Conrad spread his hands, causing 6 100 meters tall peach blossom trees to spout from the ground and form a defensive force field around him. The flood met with the force field in a dreadful eruption of force, but failed to break through. Ha 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 ha. The shadow of 100 meters tall Anzu and Stola's beasts appeared at Conrad's back as he maniacally laughed and turned into dozens of afterimages that bathed in a purple vortex of light and lightning. The dozens of afterimages turned into violet beams, piercing through the von Grattel elders' defenses to storm the water temple exarchs at their back. The pressure of the 2 holy and 2 divine physiques broke all coordination between the priests whose forte didn't lie in close-quarter combat, to begin with. It is not that I want to kill you. You just don't cherish your lives. The dozens of Conrad slashed, the broadswords sang in the night sky, and the heads of 6 true origin saints soared, detached from their bodies in clean beheading, their blood drenching their headless bodies below. And from 22, the congregation was reduced to 16. But Conrad didn't stop. Before his enemies could react, his afterimages turned into dozens of light and lightning meteors that flew back into the 6 true origin von Grattel saints. The fate-wrestling saint elders didn't have time to raise defenses, and by the time Conrad returned to his original spot, those true origin saints all had gruesome, human-sized holes within their chests. From those holes, light and lighting still brew. 12 true origin saint corpses thus dropped from the night sky, leaving the 10 fate-wrestling saints as the only contenders. The 10 tribulation stage experts were startled, not due to Conrad's shocking display, but because from his moves, they could finally gauge his true cultivation. And what they saw terrified them to the point they no longer trusted their senses, fearing they'd all fallen into an illusion. All 10 exchanged confused looks, and seeing the same truth in one another's eyes, they floundered, dread overwhelming their hearts. And while they gathered all possible reasoning to make sense of what they felt, Conrad released a rainbow-colored light, proving all their fears correct. Because while they couldn't identify its exact rank, they could clearly feel that the rainbow light was nothing more than transcendence. What's Saint Elder? He's just a transcendent rank junior. A transcendent rank junior capable of slaying true origin saints and meeting fate-wrestling saints as an equal. Where could such a monster possibly hail from? Even Yvonne Void in her prime wasn't this horrifying. Could he be a higher realm junior? But how? As the possibility dawned to their minds, both the Great Elder and Conclave leader felt cracks within their fighting spirit. Iron. We've kicked iron, shit. But as Conrad turned, and they saw the blood of their comrades drenching his face and robe, apprehension made way for battle intent. Their determination returned. Since we've offended, we must offend to the end. We must fight until only one side remains standing. And regardless of the consequences, defend our dignity. One boy cannot end our hegemony. The 10 inwardly roared and gathered for a new assault. Activate the formation. 10 blue light rays erupted from various corners of the royal palace and connected to the 10 experts' hearts. The lights then went from one to another until the 10 fate wrestling saints were all linked by the formation and saw their battle power soar. At the same time, they summoned their pure selves, and with the great elder leading the charge, surrounded Conrad from all sides. Brandishing his ruler, the great elder condensed a magnified force of the 10 fate wrestling saints combined, summoning a sea deluge that pierced the sky to crash onto Conrad. Conrad didn't dread it. With his flesh and bones being as resilient as they were, at worst, he would suffer some internal damage. This blow could never take his life. Only those below would suffer. However, if he maintained his current battle power, there was also no hope for victory. At best, he could only withdraw. Therefore, it was time to go all out and summon dread in the hearts of those overreaching ants. Conrad's skin turned scarlet. 2 large pairs of jet-black horns sprang from his forehead, one goat-shaped, the other ram-shaped, while scarlet flesh wings also grew from his back. Horrible demonic energy exploded from his form, covering the entire royal palace and sending it into an uproar. Demon? He's a demon. A true demon. The 10 fate wrestling saints were alarmed, and if even they had reached such a fright state, one could only imagine how badly the royal palace's denizens shivered. Demonkind, the lords of nightmares, avatars of sin, mayhem, and destruction, had finally appeared before them. Terrified. They were all terrified. But with the palace having already fallen to his force's hands, Conrad was undisturbed. The royal guard was deployed to suppress dissidents. Awaken, Manbreaker. While still holding the broadsword in his right hand, Conrad summoned Manbreaker in his left for a final assault. The jet-black, spiked, infernal warhammer appeared as the fulfillment of all the fate wrestling saints' fears. The hammer and not the whip. Tauratha's blood and not Asmodeus. Ends. My Von Grattel dynasty ends. The great elder's eyes went bloodshot with sorrow, rage, and unwillingness blazing within his heart. But regardless of how unwilling he was, he knew this night was doomed to turn into a tragedy. Meanwhile, Augusta's father was receiving startling news. Conclave leader, help. Following your departure, we've been assaulted by 2 men who are currently butchering us like cattle. And instantly, he realized that from the beginning, they were playing in the enemy's palm. But he wasn't given time to lament, because Conrad raised his warhammer toward the sky and summoned 6 purple circles. 6th circle spell, light meteor. Purple clouds replaced all that previously stood in the sky, and from it, a maelstrom of purple light emerged, releasing a gigantic purple meteor that descended upon the 10. Bang! With the demonic force empowering soul and physique, they couldn't resist, the formation collapsing under the unstoppable assault. Overlord's might. Sword in one hand, hammer in the other, Conrad vanished and appeared before one of the fate wrestling saints. With his hammer, he tore through his waist, and with his sword, he beheaded him. What lies ahead victory is uncertain. However, we know that defeat means destruction. Therefore, you can't falter. We must fight with all our might. The great elder roared and slammed his ocean-blue ruler at Conrad in a tremendous eruption of holy force. The remaining 8 followed suit, fighting tooth and nails against the demonic oppressor. Alas, to no avail. With the formation broken and the backlash that ensued, their combined forces were no match for Conrad's all-out assault. One after the other, they fell in a gruesome feast of blood and gore. Resist, resist, just in case. We've already contacted Great Void. Fate-destroying saint reinforcements will soon be on their way. The great elder and conclave leader roared to the remaining 3 saints. What they didn't know was that beyond the royal palace, the corpses of their reinforcements lied broken at the gate, butchered by Yvonne. No reinforcements would ever find their way to the scene. Crack, crack, crack. Slash, slash, slash. In a macabre dance, Manbreaker tore through the chests of the 3 subordinates, while the broadsword removed their heads from their bodies. They were not even given enough time to scream. Conrad then appeared before Augusta's father, and without hesitation, His spiked hammer and sword hacked him into pieces. Thus, only the Great Elder remained. Since destruction is the only road, do not blame me for being heartless. A berserk current of holy force erupted from the Great Elder's body as he prepared his self-detonation. The massive explosion came in less than a second, hitting Conrad point-blank and sending him spiraling into the ground. In a startling dust blast, he cratered. But before the explosion could lay waste on the royal palace, Yvonne appeared to restrain it, turning the large holy force explosion into nothingness. She then landed by Conrad's side. What a pointless show of dust. My poor clothes. Conrad commented while standing up from the ground, showing a naked but unharmed form. Reassuming his human form, he turned toward Yvonne, who eyed him from head to toes. One must admit that even flaccid, your girth is impressive, she commented while summoning a black cloak which she placed over his shoulders. Chapter 210. Who's your father? Oh, if you're that interested, you can touch, you know? Following Yvonne's words, Conrad replied with a playful smile, causing her to roll her eyes. Considering how often I get to touch you, I have no need to show such eagerness. Pass. A pity, such a wasted opportunity. Clearly, I have given you too much favor. Conrad lamented and stretched out his arms. Dark mist flew from his fingertips to wrap around the lingering souls of his 20 victims. The souls' vacant eyes showed no desire to struggle, and effortlessly, the dark mist pulled them toward Conrad, who opened his mouth to swallow them within. Before the divine spirit rank, dead souls couldn't show consciousness, lingering at their place of death for varying time intervals before heading into the reincarnation cycle. While Conrad used the infernal soul-devouring art to refine the souls, pitch-black fog swirled around him, and his scara went from white to black. But as his spiritual cultivation and soul power rose, Yvonne frowned. Clearly, she could feel Conrad's spiritual cultivation already was half a step into the semi-holy priest rank. A full breakthrough was imminent. Too soon, within his mind, Conrad battered the barriers of the semi-holy priest rank. Better than anyone, he could feel himself ready to break through that rank. However, as he approached success, darkness clouded his mind, and he entered a pitch-black world where nothingness reigned. What is the meaning of this? Conrad frowned while his eyes swept the empty perimeter. At that time, a voice echoed within his mind. Who are you? What is your path? What Tao do you pursue? As the mild voice echoed within his mind, Conrad had no answer to offer. Silence ensued. Without understanding the self, how can there be purity? Without purity, how can there be sainthood? Go back. When you grasp your Tao and complete your sublimation, you may return. The darkness then covered Conrad, erasing his presence from the scene. His eyes opened to the sight of Yvonne standing by his side. Your Tao sublimation is incomplete. Therefore, while you fulfill all soul power requirements, you cannot break through the semi-holy rank. Conrad nodded. Tao sublimation served as an identification of the true self, an identification of the core desires that drove the individual on the cultivation road. There were thousands of roads, with some being weaker than others. Fortunately, cultivators could reject their primary road to enlighten themselves in a better one. However, once the cultivator strayed from his chosen road, backlashes would ensue. At best, their cultivation would not be able to go a step further. At worst, they would fall back to the transcendent rank. Following his demonic cultivation method, Ulrich achieved Tao sublimation in heartlessness, Elmar in shielding, Adelar in power, Yvonne in invincibility, and so on. Those were all high-level paths, and it was hard to say if one trumped another. The strength of a sublimation chiefly depended on how challenging it was to maintain or fulfill. The more challenging, the more powerful. As for Conrad, he indeed experienced some difficulty in figuring out the most suitable path. On the one hand, invincibility seemed to be the most straightforward choice, but on the other hand, he felt that path lacking in one ingredient. Never mind, it can wait for a little bit. Undisturbed, Conrad set aside those thoughts and turned heels. At the same time, he sent the royal guards several orders to restore the peace and summoned the delegates to bring phantasm orchids to whoever still needed them. Meanwhile, Ernst sat on his throne with vacant eyes staring at the entrance. Suddenly, the crown prince rushed in alongside the third and fourth prince. In tandem, the trio dropped onto their knees, fright written all over their faces. Disaster, horrendous disaster. The elders, lost, and alongside the water temple's leaders, all perished. The crown prince sobbed and kowtowed in dramatic lamentation. The other two princes were no different, but strangely, no ripple flashed on Ernst's face, and he merely nodded in approval. Standing up, he walked down the stairs with his arms crossed beneath his back, his still vacant eyes staring at the entrance. "Father, say something." Our house's 50,000 years of inheritance has thoroughly collapsed, without any way to redress the situation. Over, it's over. Why aren't you say? But before the crown prince could finish his words, Ernst's head abruptly shifted toward him. "Father? Who's your father?" Stretching out his arm, Ernst summoned his holy energy sword, brandishing it at his eldest son whose eyes widened in disbelief. Ernst asks, "Who's your father?" Slash. The sword dropped on the crown prince's neck, lopping it off in one eruption of blood. The other two princes were startled, but Ernst didn't stop. "Ernst asked you a question. Son of a whore, who is your father?" Slash slash slash. Ernst's sword cut through the crown prince's body like a knife through butter, hacking him till all his limbs lied in a blood pool, detached from his body. Seeing their eldest brother reduced to 10 clean pieces bathing in blood, terror filled the other two princes. And as their brain finally processed the situation and gave them the order to run for their lives, Ernst turned toward them. "Why is he not answering?" He roared, and staggering, the two princes dropped on their rear, eyes still wide with fright. "Asleep. He fell asleep. That's why he's not answering." The fourth prince stammered, drawing an approving nod from Ernst. "Okay, what about you? Who's your father?" Ernst seriously asked while walking toward the fourth prince. Hearing this, the third prince no longer hesitated and turned into a light beam to shoot toward the exit. Why is he running? Ernst hasn't asked him yet. Guilty, guilty, son of a whore. Ernst turned into another light beam, stopped the third prince mid-flight by grabbing his right leg and aimed his sword at his waist. "Help, help, help. Father, I'm your son. We're your children. What is wrong with you? Please spare me." The third prince begged, but to no avail. Nonsense. Ernst clearly sees the truth. Ernst has no children. Since you don't wish to speak true, Ernst can only kill you. Slash. Ernst's sword descended on the third prince's waist, cutting him in half. With a 180-degree turn, Ernst vanished and reappeared before the fourth prince, who shivered on his rear, not daring to stand up. "Do you want to make Ernst repeat himself?" "No, no. I'm the royal guard commander's son. You and I have absolutely no relationship. I just followed them to give the news. They're really hateful. Incomparably hateful. How dare they try to cheat the monarch?" The trembling fourth prince replied while lowering his eyes onto the ground, not able to face the crazed glint in Ernst's eyes. "Oh, the royal guard commander is Ernst's lifelong friend. As his son, in the future, you must become a pillar of the state." "Yes, yes. A pity that the state is lost and the house facing destruction. But it's fine." Ernst placed holy rank explosives all around the palace. "Now that the elders are gone, we can detonate them and bring all those invaders to destruction. Sacrifice ourselves to cleanse the state and become legends." Ernst exclaimed with his arms outstretched and his wide, crazed eyes facing the throne room's ceiling. His words almost caused the edgy fourth prince to lose his countenance and soil himself. Clap, clap, clap. A clapping sound came from the entrance, forcing the two to turn toward its origin. There, Conrad stepped in with Yvonne by his side. I must say it wasn't that terrible of an idea. A pity that the royal palace is now my backyard and I already had the royal guard secure all your explosives. Chapter 211, We Get What We Go. Conrad's appearance startled Ernst, who'd not expected him to show up. At least, not so fast. With his crazed silver eyes staring directly into Conrad's purple hues, and his index aimed at his face, Ernst proclaimed, "You? How could it be you? How could it not be?" Ernst supposes it was inevitable. "Welcome." Ernst then lowered his index, and his eyes shifted toward Yvonne, who stood by Conrad's side. What beauty, what sex appeal, simply out of this world. With such a woman by your side, why do you still need to plunder Ernst's garden? Greedy. You are greedy. But it's fine. It's all fine. Now, Ernst sees the truth. Amused, Conrad chortled. Oh, and what truth is that? Ernst's eyes shifted back onto Conrad, and his lips flashed a smile. First, Ernst wants to know your true name. Conrad. Good, Conrad. In just a few days, you've put our 15 states on their knees, unified our land, and established a new dynasty. The military, the court, the wealth, the women, all are within your hands. Good, very good. Truly worthy of being a demon spawn. But Ernst isn't sad, because having embarked on the road of the conqueror without absolute heartlessness, you're doomed to suffer. Ernst can see that within your demonic eyes, besides bottomless ambition, care still remains, if only for the women by your side. Alas, on the path of conquest, on the road to become supreme, suffering losses is inevitable. In your pursuit of absolute power and domination, there will be a time when you'll set them aside, a time when you won't be there for the ones you genuinely care for. Fate will choose that moment to play a joke on you. And from experience, Ernst can tell you, fate is a cruel mistress that will prick your heart with 10,000 daggers. Ernst declared with wide, crazed eyes that didn't match his level tone. Hearing his words, no ripple flashed on Yvonne's face. If she thought anything of them, she didn't show it. As for Conrad, his smile broadened. Nice swan song. However, I beg to differ, and if fate wishes to mess with me, I will fuck her into submission, like all the rest. As for you, you've outlived your usefulness. Conrad stretched out his hand, causing terrible demonic energies to barrel into Ernst and fill his body. Lifted by the demonic force, Ernst rose from the ground, his body bloating up like a balloon at breakneck speed. Ernst is not sad. Ernst wails but isn't sad. In the netherworld, Ernst will wait for karma to give you its retribution. There must be justice in the world. There must be, otherwise, why does Ernst perishes so? Ha 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 ha. But as Ernst's crazed laughter echoed, Conrad's smile remained undisturbed. I forgot to mention, you're not going to the afterlife. Your soul is about to turn into another one of my meals, forever vanishing from the reincarnation cycle. Hearing those words, Ernst's eyes shone with stupor. How could a man be this evil? Ernst doesn't deserve this. Ernst curses you. The swelling Ernst roared and thrashed in the air, attempting to resist Conrad's demonic force, but to no avail. The only joke fate plays is birth. People don't get what they deserve, they get what they get. Therefore, Ernst von Gradl, at the dusk of your existence, allow me to enlighten you in a few simple truths. While it is true that actions bring chain reactions, there is only one justice in this world. The justice of the mightiest. Man's will shape the world. He who controls all needs not care about karma and retribution. Ernst's bloated body imploded, drenching the throne room's ground in flesh, blood, and bones. Dark mist erupted from Conrad's fingers to trap Ernst's soul and bring it to Conrad's lips. Without hesitation, he swallowed it whole. His eyes then dropped onto the fourth prince, who floundered in a blood pool, with his father's flesh pieces covering him. Congratulations, fourth prince. As the eldest surviving son of House von Gradl's main line, the throne is yours. Long live the emperor. Hearing this, the shivering fourth prince awoke from his stupor, crawled toward Conrad's feet and incessantly kowtowed. I don't want to be the emperor. I don't want to be the emperor. Demon sir, I beg you, please let me leave out the rest of my life in peace. While usually, princes would fight for the right to inherit the throne, the fourth prince didn't dare have such an idea. If the thought of becoming the first emperor of the new, unified country should generally appeal to many, with the current situation, no sane man would want that throne. Joke. The so-called Profane dynasty was Conrad's playground. All across its territory belonged to him. Those 8 billion citizens may not know his name, but it would be his will that directed their daily lives. Whoever sat on the throne would just be a shameful puppet without any say in official matters. What outwardly looked like unparalleled glory was, in fact, nothing more than a ticket to a lifetime of humiliation. The fourth prince dared not call himself bright, but at the very least, he could see a fiery pit where it lied and would not throw himself into such an abyss. Alas, it wasn't his choice to make. If you won't cooperate, I'm afraid I must make the fifth prince the heir. Do you understand what that means? The fourth prince banged his head against the floor and moved no further, his body quivering in understanding. Without their father to officially demote him, for the fifth prince to become the heir, he had to die. Knowing that his life couldn't be preserved if he rejected the demonic oppressor, he helplessly chose submission. From now on, I will obey your every words and arrangement. If you say A, I won't dare say B. If you look right, I won't dare look left. I only hope that you can show some mercy in your future treatment of my poor self. The fourth prince pledged while keeping his now bleeding forehead on the ground. Good. Don't worry. Those who serve under Conrad's banner are always treated fairly. Rewards for the meritorious and punishment for the failures. With a wave of his hand, Conrad summoned a phantasm orchid which he threw at the fourth prince. Swallow. Without hesitation, the fourth prince devoured the orchid. Satisfied, Conrad nodded. Tomorrow we shall have an important meeting. I hope your majesty won't be late. Oh, and for tonight's deaths, do you know what you should say? The previous king, princes, and elders were murdered by foreign assassins. They shall be buried with honors. Although there was nothing to bury, this script was good enough. Good man. Then alongside Yvonne, Conrad turned heels, leaving the first and last Von Gradel emperor to collapse on the ground. Chapter 212 for the common people. Peace finally returned to the night, but in that peace, dread still lingered. Unequal dread, that is. If both male and female denizens of the royal palace were terror-stricken by Conrad's demonic powers and awe-inspiring might, at least the consorts and concubines had already surrendered in the night of debauchery. Therefore, they knew what to expect and weren't as startled as the maids and eunuchs. Still, even Augusta was forced to admit that she'd not expected such a shocking display. Although following the revelation of his demonic nature, she didn't expect Conrad to lose to the elders. The strength he showcased still surpassed her calculations. When the Von Gradel elders and Water Temple leaders perished, she was the first to heave a sigh of relief. Better than anyone, she knew that should they triumph, her father would never spare her. A cruel and unforgiving man, he would undoubtedly use her life to cleanse shame and restore family honor. While she wouldn't dance on his grave, asking her to shed tears for a man who raised his daughters as expendable chess pieces was, indeed, too much to ask. And as soon as Conrad's servants finished the distribution of orchids, all apprehension vanished from the royal palace. But as they crossed the road back to their chambers, although she let nothing appear, Conrad could feel some unsettlement within Yvonne's gate. What's wrong with you? Did my head consort get startled by a trivial worm's last words? Arching her eyebrows, Yvonne stopped in her tracks and turned toward Conrad, who observed her with a gentle smile. I said it before. When I seize the throne of supremacy, you'll be by my side. Regardless of what title I wield, you will be my counterpart. Nothing can stop this future from occurring. Anyone who tries to stand in the way of that aspiration, we shall obliterate. Therefore, You shouldn't pay any heed to the words of the defeated. In the future, we will have many such curses. Must we take them all seriously? Hearing Conrad's reassuring attempt, Yvonne chortled. You misunderstand. Those are not my concerns. If I need to bother you with it, I will, of course, tell you. Satisfied, Conrad pulled Yvonne by the waist. Good. If my wife could get flustered by a ruined fool's words, I would truly be disappointed. With a soothing smile, Yvonne leaned against Conrad's chest. If we can't even show this bit of confidence in ourselves, how can our profane reign stretch across eternity? She jested, and arms in arms, the two returned to their quarters for a night of passion. What Yvonne failed to say was that back in the Holy Flame Empire's imperial palace, unsettling rumors circulated. Rumors whose consequences were hard to fathom. Word was that after 9,000 years of cultivation, the top von Jürgen expert, Adelwin von Jürgen, finally found the road to star connection and was on the verge of a breakthrough. If he succeeded, the entire cultivation pattern of the Holy Flame Empire would experience shocking changes. At the very least, the Void and the Holy Flame Church faced great dangers. After all, if there was one thing both Ulrich and Adelwin could agree on, it was that those two forces were their von Jürgen dynasty's greatest obstacles. At dawn, the pair awoke, and Yvonne assumed her cobra form to coil around Conrad. Afraid to trigger their new lord's ire, the officials didn't even wait for the sun to properly rise before gathering in the throne room. Dozens of high-ranking officials methodically lined up, forming orderly rows and columns before the throne. The fourth prince then stepped in, except that this time, his princely attire was replaced by a white mourning robe and headband. Seeing those items, the officials were startled and went into an uproar. Why is His Fourth Highness donning mourning clothes? Is it possible that something happened last night? How could this be, and where is the king? Following the country's unification, shouldn't he be here to assume the imperial crown? Although the officials had already been briefed on last night's events, they still needed to put on a good show. The fourth prince dragged his slouching body toward the bottom of the stairs leading to his father's golden throne, then turned toward the officials. Officials, pillars of the state. It is with abysmal sorrow that I must announce the death of our monarch, my beloved father, Ernst von Gradl. The fourth prince announced with a deep sigh and lowered his head toward the ground with his eyes shut. Oh! Hearing the shocking news, the officials' mouths and eyes widened in a glaring show of stupor. Last night, great void assassins broke into the royal palace to murder the king, the elders, the crown prince, the second prince, and the third prince. Having received the news, the water temple tried to come to our aid, but to no avail. Their leaders perished in the fight. Initially, Great Void wanted to use the opportunity to destroy our entire main line and ruin our country's foundation. But thanks to the commotion that ensued, they alarmed a righteous elder who, unable to watch idle, raised his sword in defense of the royal family, slew the invaders, and saved those last few of us. With another sigh, the fourth prince turned toward the golden throne, dropped onto his knees, and kowtowed. Father, your son was useless and failed to protect you. Please forgive my incompetence, and may you rest in peace. Following the fourth prince's example, the officials paid their respects to the deceased monarch. Your Majesty, please forgive our incompetence, and may you rest in peace. All thrice kowtowed toward the golden throne, then returned to their feet. Now, everyone, allow me to introduce you to the hero to whom all von Gradl owe their salvation. Surely, you know him well. Protector, please step in. In a purple haze, Conrad appeared at the entrance, dressed in a white robe and black overcoat. With his pet cobra coiling around him, he took a step forward, vanished, and reappeared before the fourth prince. Protector, without you, my house would have disappeared from this world. Please accept my bow. The fourth prince proclaimed, with warm tears and a theatrical bow. But as he bent, Conrad stopped him and lifted him back up. Your Highness needs not show me such deference. I only did what righteousness commanded. My only regret is that I couldn't come in time to save the monarch. Conrad sobbed, then turned toward the gathered officials. Though we all grieve the king's loss, even for one day, a country cannot remain without a ruler. As the eldest surviving son, it is the fourth prince's duty to assume the throne. And now that the state rulers have decided to remove the frontiers and unify the country under the von Gradel rule, the Fourth Highness should officially abandon the royal style to don the title of emperor, henceforth becoming the Profound Sea dynasty's first emperor. Any objections? None whatsoever. Long live the emperor. The officials instantly replied and fell on their knees to greet their new monarchs. Since everyone requests me to shoulder this responsibility, I cannot decline. With a helpless sigh, the fourth prince accepted the position, henceforth becoming the Profound Sea Emperor. As emperor, my first act should be to reward your valor. Moreover, I understand that I'm muddled and wasn't raised for governance. We live in chaotic times. The neighboring states are at war and assassinations run amok. Therefore, Protector, I not only beseech you to accept the position of Grand Preceptor and serve as my state's highest official, but I also humbly request that you take on the mantle of Regent. Please help me shoulder my heavy responsibilities and bring my state to prosperity. The Profound Sea Emperor pleaded with his hands clasped in a submissive bow. Alas, I'm a Holy Flame dignitary. Lord, the Holy Flame Empire is mighty and doesn't need you while our foundation has been shaken and requires you to solidify it. His Majesty is right. For the sake of righteousness, for the sake of the common people, we all humbly beseech you to accept this position and guide us to prosperity. We beseech you. The dozens of high-ranking officials begged in theatrical kowtows. At that time, as if gathered by mental messages, hundreds of mid-ranked officials assembled beneath the stairs leading to the throne room and similarly kowtowed. The world is chaotic, the state is in jeopardy, the common people face sufferings. For the sake of righteousness, we beseech you, Lord, to accept this position and become our country's guide and teacher. The pleading voices of hundreds of officials seemed to shake Conrad to the core of his soul, and warm tears dropped from his eyes. What virtue! What morality! With such words, how can I still decline? For the sake of the common people, for the sake of righteousness, I accept. And as Grand Preceptor, as the country's guide and teacher, I swear to uphold this morality and lead the Profound Sea dynasty to the Holy Continent's summit. As Conrad's words echoed, tears and emotions filled the imperial palace. Thank you, Grand Preceptor. But chaos never ends. One conflict replaces another, and the common people always face sufferings. Therefore, for their sake, we also request that your regency lasts an eternity. The Profound Sea Emperor exclaimed, and his officials repeated after him. Helpless, Conrad sighed and replied, Though it profoundly grieves me, I accept. As long as unrest plagues this land, my regency shall continue. And if eternity is what it takes for unrest to subside, then throughout eternity, I shall be regent. Chapter 213 Awakening Fiend. While the hundreds of mid-level officials hadn't been subjected to the phantasm orchids, following Conrad's mental orders, their families were all seized by the high-ranking officials' forces. Therefore, all those pedantic scholars who usually swore by righteousness, order, and the common people now facilitated the glaring takeover. And as soon as the play ended, Conrad got to work. The former state rulers were forced to dispatch their treasuries reserves to the capital, using semi-saints as couriers and space treasures as containers. Conrad seized all he needed, and following a redistribution of resources, left them enough to keep their domains running without disturbance. The rest fueled the capital's activities. At the same time, he also had them dispatch their semi-saint and saint-level experts to feed the Imperial Guard. Meanwhile, the construction of talent assessing centers throughout all cities was a massive, unprecedented project estimated at 2 billion purple crystals. Setting aside that sum was one of Conrad's first deeds. And with all powers concentrated within the capital, The country went from decentralized to centralized in a heartbeat. With well-placed purple crystals and phantasm orchids, he also started bamboozling the foreign countries' intelligence networks within the Profane dynasty. Messengers were then dispatched across the country to inform all citizens of the new state of things. At that time, foreign dignitaries and spies brought back both the news of the country's abrupt, peaceful unification under the von Gradel rule and the appearance of a mysterious Grand Preceptor. As for the spies that snuck into the palace to obtain more in-depth information, they would all return empty-handed. Through the army tokens, Conrad had the generals gather a 3 million-man strong army set at the border between the Profane dynasty and the Great Void Empire. He then sent a semi-saint messenger to the Holy Flame Empire to inform Ulrich of the country's readiness to assist and the princess' impending arrival for marriage. Though startled, Ulrich cared little about the Water Kingdom's transformation. He only cared about how it affected his schemes. Since nothing changed, he carried on with his plans. Great Void's nefariousness knows no limit. For the sake of petty benefit, they don't even hesitate to forsake the principle of righteousness and help the Earth Kingdom Alliance's evil. Enough is enough. We've tolerated them for far too long. It is high time we teach them a lesson, avenge the murdered prosperous wind imperial kinsman, and return the holy continent to purity. Using the righteous banner of assisting his in-laws and stopping unlawful assault, Ulrich dispatched his forces, sending legions of holy flame soldiers to descend upon Great Void's eastern border and seize its cities. Initially, the Profane dynasty's troops should have crashed on the western border. But as soon as Holy Flame forces began their assault, the Profane dynasty announced its neutrality, withdrew its forces, and cut all alliance talks with the Holy Flame Empire. At the same time, the delegation members sent back messages. The newly formed Profane dynasty has been treating us with profound courtesy. Therefore, Your Majesty, we've decided to settle within the capital for some time. We wish you the best of luck in this war and your future endeavors. Long may you reign. Ulrich almost spat blood, and seeing the seal he personally bestowed upon Conrad, he inferred they'd all been taken hostages. And indeed, the Profane Emperor soon sent him another message. Your Majesty's 9th son, 10th elder, and delegates are finding my country hard to leave. The world is chaotic. Perhaps when the war ends, they will find the desire to return home. In the meantime, I hope we can maintain peaceful relationships and avoid tragedies. After reading the impudent words, Ulrich tore the paper to shreds. How dare the immature whelp threaten me? Once I'm done with Great Void, they can be sure I won't spare them. Ulrich roared. Alas, although his forces still trumped Great Void's, without the Profane dynasty's support, the war was doomed to drag. Especially since, while claiming neutrality, Profane secretly supported Great Void and the Earth Kingdom Alliance's military effort by supplying them with rations, explosives, and all kind of military equipment. Everything besides effectively dispatching troops. Thus, although the Holy Flame Empire had yet to meet defeat, the Holy Continent was gradually settling in a stalemate. If that wasn't enough, Ulrich faced other problems. Across those last few days, starting with the Profane dynasty, all countries saw the emergence of a new group of prophets heralding catastrophic disasters for the Holy Continent. Those prophets claimed to serve the profane prince, the one true God who, enraged by the Holy Continent's heathens and unbelievers, would soon send calamities to obliterate them. Since wannabe prophets appeared from time to time, no one took them seriously. However, all attempts to seize those troublemakers ended with them vanishing out of the blue, causing fear and apprehension to start spreading throughout the populace. Still, that was only a small issue. The real problem was within his backyard. Adelar awoke, rising with a strength that left Ulrich with only two choices: destroy or get destroyed. Within his chambers, Adelar von Jürgen's eyes opened, the left now crimson-red while red fog swirled around him. Lorenz, who stood by his side, was scared witless by the dreadful force erupting from his elder brother and immediately dropped onto his knees. Congratulations, second brother, on achieving sainthood. Please forgive my reckless move that hastened your plans. Lawrence both congratulated and apologized. However, Adelar remained undisturbed. After 2 centuries of accumulations, Father's pesky seal is finally broken. The pill's effects are even better than I anticipated. Adelar rejoiced while standing up. Stretching out his arms, he let his blood fog erupt alongside the full might of his rising holy force, and his cultivation skyrocketed. Early stage rising saint, mid-stage, late stage, early stage profound saint. His cultivation kept rising until it reached the peak of the true origin saint rank, and there it stopped. Meanwhile, spiritual and demonic energies intertwined within his holy force. And although their cultivation now stood at the same level, Lawrence didn't doubt that the intensity of his brother's aura surpassed that of their father's. And that aura wasn't even stabilized yet. Lawrence barely restrained the urge to soil himself. The situation called for a prompt reaction. You did what you had to. I don't blame you. Thank you, second brother. Summon the 7th, the 8th, and the 11th elders. Unfortunately, because we took this step a bit earlier than expected, I will have to use them to perfect my foundation. As you command, Lawrence exclaimed, then excused himself, leaving Adelar alone within the room. With a 180-degree rotation, he turned toward a nearby mirror and stepped toward it. Facing the mirror, Adelar intently stared at his crimson left eye and gently brushed it. His emotionless face softened. Mother, if an afterlife there is, I hope that from it you can watch how your son uses the accursed lineage of Ashara's blood fiends, our accursed lineage, to seize the empire and avenge your death. While clenching his left hand, Adelar extended his right palm toward the mirror, resting it on his reflection. 3 days, I only need 3 days. In success, I shall glorify you. In failure, I shall join you, never to part again. Crack. Unable to bear the pressure of Adelar's palm, the mirror shattered, and its pieces dropped onto the ground. Adelar closed his eyes, and the blood fog surrounding him instantly vanished. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.